Otaku in the Marvel DC Universe. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 51. Meet the protagonist again. So, how are the preparations on your side going? Led by this young lady, Liang Yue and the others crossed the courtyard, slowly heading towards a magnificent Western-style mansion in the distance. During the journey, besides the ordinary people who were camping in the manor, he also noticed many objects covered with tarpaulins in the corners of the estate, which he assumed were some necessary supplies. Takashi, Rai, and Hirano, the three of them have been driving out frequently in the past 2 days, bringing back a lot of news. If it were you, the transportation hubs on that map should be almost cleared, right? Saya Takagi, upon hearing this, gave an irrelevant answer. Liang Yue didn't mind, as he was already well aware of the tsundere nature of this twin-tile girl. Yet, we just finished clearing the highway bridge today. The road to the sea airport should now be considered unobstructed. Unobstructed? Logically speaking, there should still be many abandoned cars along the way, especially on that highway bridge, which should be a necessary route to leave the Tokyo metropolitan area, right? Even without the zombies, it would take a lot of time to clear those cars. I've hammered those cars into iron blocks. Saya-chan, why haven't I seen Kimuro-kun and the others? While looking around, Ms. Shizuka suddenly interjected and asked. The three of them are out with people looking for tools because the electromagnetic pulse earlier made it necessary to find a lot of things to repair the scrapped electronic components. Currently, only a small number of retired self-defense force military vehicles in the entire Takagi family can still start normally. As for safety, there's no need to worry. My father went with them too. Why didn't I tell you before that nuclear bombs would definitely fall? Did you prepare for that? Ugh, who knew it would be today? Bickering all the way, the group quickly arrived inside the main house. A woman in a purple dress was already waiting in the hall. If Liang Yue guessed correctly, this woman, who looked to be in her 30s, with a mature and elegant charm, should be Saya Takagi's mother, Yuriko Takagi. Welcome, everyone. The Takagi family is honored. After some pleasantries, Madame Takagi personally treated them to a delicate dinner in the dim candlelight. The group seemed to temporarily put aside the survival pressure of the apocalypse. They didn't express any opinions on the current chaotic situation. During the meal, they only discussed some old news and interesting stories from the past, which could be considered a pleasant time for both host and guests. After dinner, Madame Takagi personally arranged accommodation for the three of them and then turned and left, leaving Liang Yue feeling a bit of stomach pain. And Saya Takagi, this little girl, seemed to be much more well-behaved than usual during dinner, always acting like a well-mannered and eloquent little fox. He didn't know what she was really thinking. Siko and Ms. Shizuka were also staying in their respective rooms. Although the three of them had been sleeping together for the past 2 days, they were guests in someone else's home, so it wasn't good to be too casual. Crack. Just as he was half asleep, the door suddenly opened from the outside with a soft sound. He actually forgot to lock the door. Liang Yue cursed himself inwardly, and subconsciously wanted to open his eyes. At this moment, Ms. Shizuka's cute and sexy voice suddenly rang out at the door. Oh, Liang, is Ishii-chan already asleep? As soon as Liang Yue heard this voice, he let down his guard and continued to lie on the bed, humming and groaning in a daze. Ms. Shizuka is a little unaccustomed to it. Does Ishii-chan need me to accompany him? Ishii-chan is so cute when he's asleep. You can't tell how fierce he is during the day at all. These past 2 days, Shizuka seems to have gotten used to Ishii-chan's company, and I can't bear to be apart from him anymore. At this moment, relying on the little bit of alertness he had before falling asleep, Liang Yue only felt the mattress beside him suddenly sink, and a weight slowly leaned over, nestling against his body. After that, he completely fell into deep sleep. In the morning, a burst of noise suddenly came from outside the door, followed by a knock on the door. Hearing the sound, Liang Yue immediately woke up from his sleep, rubbed his eyelids, gently pushed Ms. Shizuka beside him away, covered her with a quilt, and got out of bed. Crack. Ohio Ishii-san. I heard you arrived last night. When Kimuro-san and I came back, we originally wanted to come and visit you, but it was already too late. So Ishii-kun and Ms. Shizuka are together. Really sorry to bother you. Having not seen him for a few days, Hirano Todo seemed to have lost a little weight. At this time, the little fat man was standing neatly dressed outside the door, with a look on his face as if he had discovered an incredible secret, with a hint of envy in his expression behind him. Saya Takachi was also wearing a gothic-style white-collared shirt with a black knee-length skirt, standing there with a hint of teasing on her face. "It's okay, we were just planning to get up, then get up quickly. We'll gather in the living room in a bit." "Oh? Are we preparing to move today?" "Of course not. We have to go to that sea airport first to understand the specific situation. We'll talk about the details later. Get up quickly, my mother has already prepared breakfast. Also, we plan to requisition the car you drove here." Last night, Takashi and the others discovered a group of survivors in a large department store, and my father plans to personally lead people to rescue them. Pulling Ms. Shizuka, who was still half asleep in bed, to get dressed and get up, the two of them then arrived at the place where they had dinner last night. A group of familiar figures were already sitting at the dining table, including the little lolly Alice, and even the little dog named Jiku was still being held in her arms. In addition to that, Madame Takaji, as well as the head of the Takaji family, Koichi Takaji, whom Liang Yue was most looking forward to seeing, were not here. Obviously, these two dignitaries didn't want to disturb their gathering at this time. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the group had breakfast and then began to discuss the specific handling plan for this airport. In short, "We must try to take down that airport by today. When we went out last night, we found that the situation was not good. The zombies in the city center have gradually spread here. To transfer out safely, we must hurry." The discussion had just begun when Takashi Kimuro, as the protagonist, solemnly set the tone for everyone's itinerary today. Of course, he certainly didn't have that ability himself because according to Liang Yue's understanding of the plot, on the day the Doomsday Crisis broke out, an international flight happened to be carrying a famous foreign singer to land at that airport, and a large group of fans went to pick her up. Now, these singers and fans have mostly turned into zombies, clustering inside and outside the airport, coupled with the airport's daily passenger throughput. According to Liang Yue's estimation, there must be at least 1,000 or 2,000 zombies over there. Even for himself, he would have to fight for a long time. Chapter 52. Let me set up first. Everyone lingered over breakfast, and as they were about to leave, Liang Yue noticed that the white oak wooden sword that Seiko Birsujima usually carried had been quietly replaced with a meticulously crafted metal katana. Based on the original storyline, Liang Yue knew that this sword should be a gift from Soichiro Takaji to Seiko, and the origin of this sword seemed to be quite extraordinary. It was said to be a Murata sword made by Kanesada, a swordsmith that was forged from the steel of the military factory's cannons, and was once revered as a treasure sword during the Meiji era in Japan, capable of slicing through pig bones without damage. It was both sharp and resilient. So, Seiko-senpai must have met with Soichiro Takaji, perhaps last night? It's said that Senpai's father was once the Takaji family head swordsmanship instructor. With such a connection between the families, it's normal for him to send a sword for self-defense given the current apocalyptic pressures during the drive, in the spacious Hummer. Besides Liang Yue and Seiko Birsujima, who were the main forces, Takashi Kimuro, Kouta Hirano, Rie Miyamoto, Saya Takaji, and the female driver, Shizuka Marikawa, were all present. The little lolly Alice was naturally placed in the Takaji household due to her young age. Apart from her, the main characters had gathered together again. The joy of reunion made the atmosphere in the car very relaxed, and everyone was talking and laughing, filled with hope for the future. Liang Yue was now curiously looking at the sword that Seiko-senpai beside him had placed on her lap. After stroking the pattern on the scabbard for a while, he grabbed the hilt and gently drew it out. Clang! A pleasant sound of metal friction immediately rang out from the blade, attracting everyone's attention. Afterward, Liang Yue used his thumb to gently scrape the edge of the blade a couple of times. A chilling sense of sharpness immediately transmitted from his fingertip to his heart. This sword is indeed much better than the iron sword I made with my toolbox. Whether it's sharpness or forging level, it's not on the same level. This is a treasure sword that my father managed to collect with great difficulty. Of course, it's much better than ordinary stuff. Hearing this, Saya Takaji, who was sitting in the passenger seat, turned around to look at Liang Yue. Then, a meaningful expression appeared on her face, and she continued, "Speaking of which, Seiko-senpai has been following you for 2 days, but you weren't willing to get her a better sword." Hearing the pink-haired girl's words, Liang Yue then retracted his gaze, raised his head, and raised his eyebrows at her in response. "That's because Seiko doesn't need to draw her sword when she's with me." HMPH, wow, what a reliable statement. He, just like Liang Yue had said before, The entire route from the Takaji residence to the sea airport had been cleared by him along the way, apart from the corpses lying on the streets being a bit shocking and creating some bumps for everyone. They were almost unimpeded under the wild driving of teacher Shizuka. In just a little over a quarter of an hour, everyone had arrived at the nearby coastal highway at this moment. 20 or 30 meters in front of them, a cross-sea bridge was located there, forming a 90-degree right angle with the highway. Horizontally inserted into the sea, the bridge deck was about 30 meters wide and at least 300 or 400 meters long, leading directly to the wide sea airport on the opposite side, with a group of zombies wandering in the middle. In addition, there were many police cars parked horizontally on the bridge, which seemed to be the defense line that the police had set up before. It's just that it had already been breached by zombies, and corpses were scattered around in a mess. In comparison, the sea airport on the opposite side seemed very calm, and all the zombies inside seemed to have been cleared out. Relying on his decent eyesight, Liang Yue vaguely saw the figures of several police officers on the roof of the airport waiting. While judging from the original plot, one of those people should be teacher Shizuka's close friend, Rikaminami, right, Ishii-chan. Are we going to drive straight through? Just as Liang Yue was on the window silently observing, teacher Shizuka in the driver's seat turned her head and asked, her tone even carrying a hint of eagerness. Saying that, he pushed the door open and got out of the car, standing on the coastal highway and continuing to observe the direction of the bridge. After everyone gathered around, he continued to them, however, don't shoot for now, let me arrange things first. After speaking, he flipped his sleeves, and a sword and shield were immediately held in his hands, slowly walking forward. Seeing this, Sikobir Tsujima behind him also drew out the Murata sword in her hand and followed behind the two of them, one on the left and one on the right. Didn't take much effort to quietly solve the dozen or so zombies near the entrance of the cross-sea bridge. After a few more minutes, they even successfully advanced 30 or 40 meters into the bridge. Further ahead was the dense area of the zombie army. At this time, Liang Yue stepped in to stop Siko-senpai from continuing forward. Pulling her to the side of the bridge, leaning against a metal railing on the edge of the bridge, he looked down. After a while, Liang Yue flipped his sleeves and replaced the sword and shield in his hand with stone cubes, then walked horizontally on the bridge deck. While walking, he piled stones on the bridge in less than half a minute. A wall with a height of 1.8 meters and a width of 90 centimeters suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The whole process was silent, and even the zombie army not far away didn't notice his actions. Afterward, this guy changed to an iron pickaxe and swung it continuously at the bridge deck in front of the wall. Bang! 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 A series of harsh sounds of earth and stone excavation immediately rang out. The originally aimless zombie army was immediately attracted by the sound, roaring and surging towards everyone. Unfortunately, the wall that Liang Yue had set up before was naturally not just for show. No matter how the zombie horde pushed and scratched, it couldn't shake it in the slightest. In the next few minutes, Liang Yue just carved out a trench with a span of 1.8 meters that horizontally cracked the entire bridge in front of everyone's eyes. Below the trench were the raging waves and the sea, and the drop between them had to be at least 40 or 50 meters. A gust of sea breeze swirled upwards, making people feel a little chilly just looking at it. Half completed. After completing this project, Liang Yue exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. At this time, looking relaxed, looking back at the crowd behind him with shining eyes, he continued to wave the iron pickaxe in his hand. It's just that this time, his excavation target became the stone wall he had piled on the bridge before. So, what everyone saw next was this scene. Even though Liang Yue was at least 2 meters away from the stone wall at this time, and the iron pickaxe in his hand seemed to be just waving randomly in the air, the stone wall on the opposite side was still being hit by him from a distance, making bursts of harsh clanging sounds. Then, successively, it was into small stone cubes. Chapter 53 Flying Corpse Waterfall. Bang, bang, bang bang, bang, bang bang, 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 bang. In just over a minute, Liang Yue had completely cleared out the stone wall. As a result, all that remained between the group and the zombie horde was a trench only about 1.8 meters wide. Calling it a trench was perhaps an overstatement, as it resembled more of a small ditch. A healthy human could easily jump across it with a little effort. However, for the zombies on the other side, this small ditch was now a chasm. With a stone wall gun, nothing stood in the way of the zombie horde, and they immediately surged towards the group, who were now within reach. Then, these brainless corpses simply fell into the ditch. They kept coming, one after another, without any fear, piling up like water cascading down a cliff. They plunged headfirst with flailing limbs, crashing heavily into the surging sea. It was like a waterfall of flesh and blood made up of corpses. The others watched in a daze, a sense of loss washing over them. Liang Yue, however, wasn't idle. With a flick of his wrist, he swapped the pickaxe for a pistol bang. A fat, middle-aged zombie with a shoehorn-shaped face and a bald patch on his head had his head blown off with a single shot. A large amount of black blood, mixed with mottled yellowish-white matter, sprayed towards the zombie horde behind. Of course, whether or not the headshot was the main point, the sudden gunshot reignited the enthusiasm of the zombie horde on the other side. Those zombies that were lagging behind in the horde, looking around and hesitating to come over, immediately rushed forward like a group of elderly athletes who had heard the starting gun, dragging their stiff legs. Bang! Make some more noise. If we clear these things out sooner, we can move over here earlier. After blowing another zombie's head off, Liang Yue turned to Takashi Kimuro and Hirano Koda. These two were now equipped with firearms, one with a shotgun and the other with a sniper rifle. Not only were they powerful, but the sound of the gunshots was almost unrivaled by any other type of conventional firearm. They were perfect for attracting zombies. Boom, thump, boom, boom, thump, thump. And so, as a series of muffled and loud gunshots echoed through the air, more and more zombies began to surge in from afar. Then, heedless of their lives, they filled the ditch in front of the group. The surging sea was like a giant abyss, accepting the falling zombies without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, they were swept into the sea, never to be seen again. Seeing such a unique method of killing monsters, Takashi Kimuro and Hirano Koda seemed to be having fun while repeatedly pulling the triggers. They later opened their mouths and roared at the zombie horde with the Chunibyo-esque fervor. Shoot, roar, shoot, roar. Liang Yue, with a face full of black lines, could somewhat understand their feelings. After all, they were originally just a group of naive high school students, immersed in the most beautiful campus life of their lives. Then, one day, this life was interrupted, and so many undead monsters that wanted to eat them appeared around them. Former classmates, friends, relatives, and neighbors had all turned into man-eating monsters. Social order had collapsed almost instantly, and they lived in fear every day, naturally accumulating a lot of negative emotions in their hearts. The current roar was more like a means of emotional release. Thinking about it this way, Liang Yue could vaguely feel a trace of excitement from them. Even the women beside him seemed to be infected by Takashi Kimuro and Hirano Koda, and joined the roaring ranks. Even the originally cute and adorable Shizuka-sensei wore a look of shared hatred, and in her anger, she even picked up a stone from the ground and threw it with all her might at the zombie horde. Then, this blonde beauty, due to being too close and losing her balance, was almost dragged into the ditch by her J-cup breasts. Fortunately, Liang Yue was nearby and quickly pulled Shizuka-sensei back into his arms. After a period of dry mouth and tongue, everyone gradually calmed down. Sayatakaji, with her arms crossed, looked at the trench in front of her with shining eyes, as if she was thinking about some amazing plan. Ishii, I was thinking, this trench, can we keep it? Then we just need to find a piece of iron plate or to make a mechanism, and cover it when we need to pass. When zombies attack, we just remove it. This is equivalent to an infinite moat. Looking at the pink-haired girl beside him, Liang Yue continued her train of thought with a knowing expression. Is that what you were thinking from the beginning? Were you observing the bridge's load-bearing points earlier? Seeing his appearance, Sayatakaji pouted and asked more or less. If we don't want to damage the existing buildings, we do need to consider the load-bearing issues. When Liang Yue chose the location to dig this trench, he naturally didn't just do it randomly, going wherever he felt like it. After all, this sea bridge in front of him wasn't built by him brick by brick. As a native building in this apocalypse world, it naturally needed to be constrained by the laws of physics. So, when digging, Liang Yue also specifically checked the load-bearing pillars under the bridge to ensure that it would still be safe to drive on after the trench was dug, without filling it in. I didn't expect this girl to notice it too. She really is the brains of the protagonist team. Time passed by every minute and every second. On the other side of this trench, which was only 1.8 meters wide, the zombies kept surging over non-stop. They crowded, pushed, and howled, then filled the sea one after another. In just 5 or 6 minutes, the zombie horde on the other side had noticeably decreased, shrinking by almost a quarter. With the loud gunshots attracting them, zombies from afar were still rushing towards this side. At this rate, they would probably be able to take this sea airport without bloodshed before long. Liang Ishii-chan, where's that bunny scout hat? Hurry up and get it out. Sensei wants to wear it. At this moment, Shizuka-sensei suddenly ran over from the side, like a leaping white rabbit, grabbing Liang Yue's arm with one hand and holding Hirano Koda's telescope with the other, her face full of excitement. Judging by her expression, it seemed that this girl hadn't been affected by the previous dangerous situation at all. What's wrong? Looking at this great blonde beauty, Liang Yue asked, somewhat puzzled. but he still subconsciously took out the hat from his storage space and handed it over. Chapter 54 Lily Blooms. Putting the hat on her head, Ms. Shizuka began to jump and skip towards the approaching zombies, or rather, towards a group of police officers stationed at the sea airport behind the zombie army. Waving her arms vigorously, Liang Yue followed her gaze and looked towards the airport, only to see a figure seemingly responding from the roof of the airport hall in the distance. Nanrika? Okay, so she's just showing off to her good friend. Although the Rabbit Scout hat has good attributes, Liang Yue has never worn it out due to its appearance, so, when Ms. Shizuka asked him for ownership before, he agreed almost without hesitation. Anyway, this thing is available in the system store, and he can always buy another one when he needs it in the future. As for Ms. Shizuka, she has always cherished this hat. Usually, she would take it out and wear it at home, happily stand in front of the mirror and admire herself, strike a few poses, and caress it a few times. Most of the time, it was kept in Liang Yue's storage space just like a beloved item treasured by a little girl at the bottom of her storage cabinet. Only her closest friends would be allowed to share it, of course. To some extent, Ms. Shizuka's love for this hat should only be due to its appearance. The attributes are just a bonus. I didn't expect you to have such a hobby. You actually carry props with you. Seeing this, Saya Takagi on the side immediately wore a strange expression, stood with Rie Miyamoto, and looked at him askance. On the other side, Kota Hirano and Takashi Kimuro, who were originally busy shooting to attract monsters, also looked over thoughtfully at this time, their eyes shifting between Liang Yue and Shizuka Marikawa. With a lewd and imaginative look, Sikobir Sujima, because she knew the actual purpose of this hat, had a calm expression. But if you look closely, you will find that deep in this upperclassman's eyes, there is actually a hint of envy. Obviously, Senior Siko also likes this equipment very much, but what she values should be the attributes of this hat, right? Unfortunately, all the points on my body have been spent, and I can't buy a second one for the time being. Too lazy to pay attention to the few people around who are secretly speculating. Liang Yue came to the side of the upperclassman at this time, and with a swipe on his left wrist, a silver bracelet was taken off by him. For the time being, I don't have anything good on me, only this bracelet is of some use. Saying that, Liang Yue put the bracelet on her wrist while she was caught off guard. This is, feeling the unusual changes in her vision, Sikobir Sujima subconsciously looked around at this moment. Having undergone arduous kendo training, she keenly realized that the world she saw seemed to be different. That was an extension from the spirit. A certain unknown characteristic was attached to her eyes. The originally colorful world also became more colorful and gorgeous because she wore this bracelet. Soul Absorption Bracelet, an object that allows you to discover the power of the soul and absorb and store it. I haven't found its usage for the time being. I only know that those red soul powers can be used to strengthen weapons and knives, but that's all I know. Reaching out and pinching the woman's chin, Liang Yue looked down at her crystal clear eyes and said, "But this is too precious." Sikobir Sujima's cheeks were flushed at this moment, and she said, somewhat at a loss, "As my woman, I will naturally not favor one over the other." The affectionate eye contact between the two was naturally seen by the others in the team. For a time, everyone except Ms. Shizuka felt a little uncomfortable. The two male compatriots hummed hard in their throats as if they had phlegm stuck in them, their eyes wandering around. Saya Takagi, the little girl, even pretended to vomit and turned her head away, with an unhappy look on her face. On the other side, Rie Miyamoto looked like she was giving her blessings, and then she had an idea about Ms. Shizuka, and quickly snatched the Rabbit Scout hat and put it on her head. Then, this woman discovered a new world. Time slowly passed in the roar of the zombie army. After about half an hour, the army of dead bodies on the bridge finally reached the end of their self-destruction and fell into the sea one after another. The few scattered remnants in the distance could no longer pose any threat to everyone. They didn't even need to take action, and were shot down to the ground one by the police officers stationed at the airport. Siko, you and Ms. Shizuka drive the car over. We are preparing to enter the airport afterwards. Everyone took the car forward together. The police car defense line that was originally scattered on the bridge was gradually being cleared to both sides of the bridge by the police officers at the airport. After a period of chaos and noisy waiting, Liang Yue and others finally arrived inside the airport. Nanrika, Shizuka, as soon as she got out of the car, Ms. Shizuka couldn't wait to trot all the way to hug Nanrika, who was full of wild beauty, and confided in each other as if no one else was around. Liang Yue felt a little leg pain when he saw it, because at this time he found that the two beauties with such good figures in front of him seemed to have a bit of a Yuri tendency. On the other side, Saya Takagi, on behalf of their Takagi family, was in contact with a middle-aged man who looked like a police leader in terms of appearance and dress. As local dignitaries in Takaname City, the two obviously knew each other before. Now that they both have their own needs, although this meeting was relatively short, the two sides quickly reached a consensus on cooperation. As a result, only half an hour later, the group re-embarked on the return journey in the spacious Hummer car. In addition to Liang Yue and others, Nanrika, as the police representative, was also impressively in the ranks at this time, and firmly occupied the driver's seat, and her driving style was even more sturdy. Even the female driver, Ms. Shizuka, could only take a back seat at this time. Speaking of which, Shizuka, what's going on with the rabbit ear hat on your head? It looks a bit special at this moment. Nanrika skillfully drove the car all the way, while still having the energy to turn her head to look at Ms. Shizuka in the passenger seat. Her face full of wild beauty was full of teasing aura. Has Nanrika-chan finally noticed? Cough, how is it? Is this hat of mine good looking? Hearing this, Ms. Shizuka couldn't help but reach out and stroke the long rabbit ears, and a look of pride appeared on her face. Seeing this, Nanrika's pair of aggressive big eyes suddenly bloomed with a different kind of brilliance, and the corners of her mouth curved into a smile. It's really good. Was it specially prepared for me, Liang Yue? Everyone. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55: The Heart of the End Times. They returned to the Takagi residence without incident, and looking at the time, it was only a little after 9 in the morning. That is to say, from the time they set out, in less than 2 hours, Liang Yue and the others had successfully cleared the road to the sea airport. The efficiency was unmatched. In contrast, the other team, led by Takagi Soichiro, the head of the Takagi family, which was going to the large department store for rescue, hadn't even set out yet when Liang Yue and the others returned to the Takagi residence. The legendary leader of the Patriotic Association was just about to get into the car with his team. They met them face to face afterwards. When the party leader with a resolute and strong appearance learned about the situation at the airport from Minami Rika, he didn't hesitate at all. He immediately made a decision, decisively changed the original rescue plan, and immediately arranged for the families of the technical personnel stationed in the Takagi residence's courtyard to board the buses. According to the current number of people in the Takagi residence, it would take about 3 round trips to transfer everyone. However, in addition to people, the most important things for survival in the apocalypse are food, drinking water, machinery, and various other supplies. Therefore, only a group of protected family members and a team of accompanying guards were transferred first. The technical workers who could be of use were all arranged into the workshops to fully repair various civilian transport vehicles. Subsequently, even Liang Yue and the others were temporarily assigned a task, which was to do their best to guard the safety of the transfer route to ensure the smooth passage to the sea airport. This task is basically the same as having none. As long as you build a wall at those few intersections, with the mindless nature of zombies, they won't be able to get through for at least a few days. On the way, it was still the same group of people as when they came, and Officer Minami Rika was still driving when the Hummer H1 reached one of the intersections. Liang Yue immediately called them to stop. He leisurely placed 2 rows of 1.8-meter high stone walls at the deserted intersection and then returned to the car faced with the envious looks of everyone. Liang Yue immediately boasted shamelessly. Only Minami Rika, who was newly joined and hadn't figured out the situation yet, looked at him with a face full of surprise and uncertainty. Kushika Shizuka, seeing this, immediately introduced someone's abilities to her close friend with a bit of pride. The intimacy shown in her words was like introducing her own husband. In about half an hour, the group blocked all the traffic routes along the way using this method. Simple and crude, but also extremely effective. Just as everyone was standing at the exit of the expressway bridge, watching the first busload of transferred people successfully arrive at the airport, Miyamoto Rie walked over at this time, calling out to him from behind with some hesitation on her face. Umishii-kun, Miyamoto-san, is there anything you need? Turning his head to look at the female classmate who hadn't said a few words to him along the way, Liang Yue roughly guessed what she was planning at this time. Although it's a bit inappropriate, I still want to ask Ishii-kun for a favor. Just say it, there's no need to be so polite. Actually, my home isn't too far from here. So I'm presumptuous to ask Ishii-kun, and everyone else, to help me. I want to go home to find my mom and dad, please. After speaking, the little girl bowed deeply to Liang Yue and the others, not daring to raise her head for a long time. Miyamoto Kiriko, right. Hearing this, Liang Yue subconsciously thought about the final development steps in the original plot. It seemed that the protagonist and his party successfully found Miyamoto Riai's mother, then the author of the original manga, because of a bad heart, unfortunately passed away. No problem. Anyway, we're just idle, so why not take advantage of this time to do something meaningful, Minami Rika said, putting her arm around Shizuka-sensei's waist and walking over, glancing at someone in the process. Seeing this, Liang Yue naturally had no reason to object and nodded along. Don't worry, Riai, I will definitely help you find your mom and dad. Kimuro Takashi, as her Kwasai boyfriend, also came to Miyamoto Riai's side at this time, holding her hand and saying with a determined face, Takashi, thank you. And thank you everyone. To be honest, the difficulty of rescuing Miyamoto Riai's mother this time was not high because according to the arrangement of the script, Miyamoto Kiriko's range of activities was actually near her home. Relying on the bold personality of a former leader of a biker gang and a gun skill far superior to her daughter's when the group found her, this mature version of Miyamoto Riai was not only safe and sound, but also actively took on the task of protecting her neighbors and searching for supplies. It's just that this Miyamoto aunt was obviously a bit of a bad judge of character at this time, underestimating the ugliness of people's hearts under the enormous pressure of survival and the apocalypse. People's survival instincts will promote the infinite expansion of egoism. For example, now, Miyamoto Kiriko has clearly held a long gun and single-handedly searched for a large number of supplies and placed them at the door of her neighbor's house, but those people hiding at home are still unwilling to risk coming out to move them, let alone let her in. The reason is, what if Miyamoto Kiriko had been bitten before when she went out? Aunt Miyamoto, on the other hand, naturally felt even more wronged. I came to help you resist zombies out of good intentions, and I risk going out to collect supplies for everyone. Now, is this the treatment I get? Afterwards, the two sides began to curse loudly, each holding their own ground, and it was at this time that Liang Yue and the others appeared. Mom, Riai, the mother and daughter finally reunited, and Minami Rika, as a police officer, also stood up at the right time, speaking to the residents who were hiding at home with their doors tightly closed, explaining the situation outside. Afterwards, she asked them to quickly pack their things, come out together, and follow her to the shelter. Unfortunately, these people have already been frightened by the zombie-ridden apocalypse. Even though Minami Rika represents the official force, she is, after all, alone and weak, just one police officer. Moreover, when these people learned through inquiries that they needed to walk to a safe place, each and every one of them, who didn't even dare to leave their doors, immediately became even more cowardly and refused her proposal on the spot. Damn it. These idiots are simply unreasonable. On the way, Minami Rika slammed the steering wheel hard. Looking anxious and helpless, however, Miyamoto Kiriko in the car had calmed down at this time, seemingly not wanting to be angry with those people anymore. Where do we go next? Do we continue on the road to search for the relatives of Kimuro and Hirano, or go back to find a car to pull those people away? Liang Yue, at this time, leaned against the car window with a mentality of watching the excitement, looking at Minami Rika's black face, who was still unable to calm down, through the rearview mirror, and asked. Minami Rika also glared at him through the rearview mirror, and said, let them stay there. With the courage of those people, don't even mention going out. I'm afraid they don't even have the courage to say a word. For the time being, they are still safe. Chapter 56 Incarnation Shura. For the next 3 days, the Takagi family did almost nothing but transfer their affiliated personnel and various supplies. Clearly, as a powerful family that controlled a local political party, their wealth and the various resources they possessed far exceeded Liang Yue's imagination. Even the armory and bullet production lines that someone had dreamed of, as essential hard currency in the apocalypse, were personally brought back by Soichiro Takagi's team. But thinking about it, it makes sense. After all, Japan is essentially a closed-loop society made up of small circles. Every tycoon who can make a name for himself in this country basically has his own internal circulation system, from machinery, engineering facilities, and arms production to various daily necessities, clothing, and even the supply of consumables such as food crops. The various industries and divisions of labor within each consortium are almost all-encompassing, involving all aspects of people's lives, and are veritable social circles. Employees and their families within the conglomerate, based on a traditional value system centered on loyalty, generally choose to purchase and use the corresponding products within their own conglomerate in their daily lives. Although the Takagi family is only a small consortium rooted in a local city, it also has this kind of division of labor structure. This kind of consortium system naturally has its limitations, that is, social mobility will be relatively poor between the various conglomerate groups. There may be considerable differences in the standards, sizes, or raw material ratios of mechanical equipment from a national perspective. This model of social division of labor is relatively poor and not conducive to concerted cooperation and international competition in a large market environment, but the relative advantages are also obvious, such as the fact that the personnel within the consortium will be more united and have better discipline, especially in the current apocalyptic environment. As long as the head of the group can show enough courage and ability, then the unity and execution ability of this group of people will be astonishing. In the original plot, when the gate of the Takagi family was breached by the zombie army, and everyone was about to be submerged in the torrent of the dead, several retainers around Soichiro Takagi were still able to sacrifice themselves and actively stand in front to buy time for the head of the family to escape. This quality is truly admirable. The Takagi family in the apocalypse world, although only a small local consortium, is unlikely to reach the height of military enterprises, but Soichiro Takagi, as a political party leader, certainly knows where to find these things. This made Liang Yue, who is an outsider and only inherited the identity of an ordinary high school student, extremely envious. Fortunately, the head of the Takagi family still had some conscience, knowing that someone's existence had made great contributions to this strategic transfer, and that he himself possessed a mysterious power. So, based on the principle of clear rewards and punishments, and rewarding those who have made contributions, after the production line at the airport started operating, Liang Yue almost received an unlimited supply of ammunition. Moreover, through the mouth of Saya Takagi, the pink-haired girl, he also learned the specific location of another armory in Takanosu City. Liang Yue understood that this was probably the head of the Takagi family, who was deeply versed in the art of commanding subordinates, giving himself a reward in this tactful way. In response, while giving a thumbs up, someone secretly spat at the other party's back. Is this still trying to subdue me? You really dare to think? Just like that, as time passed day by day, the construction of this sea airport began to become increasingly complete. Gradually, this sea fortress, which was not too large in area, gradually became one of the well-known safe bases in Takanosu City, and even in the entire Tokyo Economic Zone. Those means of transportation, whether from the sea or the air, could land here, and many people and materials were transferred and distributed here every day. It was precisely by relying on these convenient conditions that the Takagi family began to establish stable connections with the military, and the two sides also slowly launched the horn of counterattack towards the land. Of course, as a small bridgehead located on the edge of the vast Tokyo Economic Zone, this airport itself was like a flatboat sailing on the sea. Although it could protect the safety of a group of people and play a certain role at certain times, its potential was very limited and not enough to support too much ambition. However, this was obviously not something Liang Yue needed to worry about. After he settled the protagonist and his party at this airport, the side mission of protecting the safety of the plot characters in this world was almost completed. After that, Liang Yue embarked on his journey alone and officially started a crazy monster grinding trip. Only when the ammunition on his body was exhausted and needed to be replenished would this guy return here, search for ammunition, and seek comfort from Siko and Ms. Shizuka. Just like that, as time passed day by day, Liang Yue's training time in this apocalypse world finally came to an end, so much so that when he reappeared in front of Takashi Kimuro and others on the last day of the month, his whole body was faintly exuding a trace of fatigue. Like a ferocious beast about to go into hibernation, he urgently needed to replenish his nutrition. However, under his almost life-threatening killing, the results were also exceptionally rich. Liang Yue strength, 25 agility, 38 constitution, 25 energy, 43 bloodline, human, sealed, talents, vigorous spirit, affinity skills, language mastery, ricochet, condition not met, not activated, advanced gun mastery, basic swordsmanship abilities, simple tool making, mech-game character main quest, quantity produces quality, completed, current kills, 123,781 advanced gun mastery, upgradable, continuously dealing one-hit kills to a certain number of targets will increase the effect of this skill effect, accuracy plus 15%, strength plus 5, agility plus 20, constitution plus 5, energy plus 25, gun attack power plus 50%, proficiency 119,767. 1 million. This total of over 120,000 zombie kills accounted for almost 1/10 of the total population of Takanosu City. This record was simply terrifying and awe-inspiring. In the past month, Liang Yue seemed to have transformed into blood-soaked Azura. His figure had almost traveled to every corner of the city accompanied by dense gunshots and killings. He left an indelible impression in the hearts of the survivors. Fortunately, Liang Yue was not an ordinary person otherwise. Based on his killing energy alone, it would be enough to plunge even the most determined soldier into severe war syndrome. The existence of the McGame character gave him great, unreasonable physical qualities at first glance. This quality was not outstanding. There were no powerful skills, no extraordinary strength and speed, no upgrade modules, and not even a trace of magic could be gathered. But at this time, after being reasonably utilized by Liang Yue, it also exerted an astonishing effect. Chapter 57 Returning Mick. After having a simple meal with Takashi Kimuro and the others, Liang Yue leisurely led Senior Tsubuki and teacher Shizuka back to the bedroom prepared for him in the Takagi residence, all while enduring Nango Saya's glaring, teeth-gritting stare. I estimate I'll be leaving in a few minutes. Be careful here, and wait for me. Putting his arms around the two women in his embrace, Liang Yue instructed them. At this time, Liang Yue-kun doesn't need to worry about us. It's you who needs to rest well. In just over half a month, you look a little haggard. Yosuji Masiko brushed the hair from his forehead, her face showing a hint of affection as she spoke. Hey, I'll definitely take a break for a while after this trip, at least a month or two, until the next time I go to another world. Smelling the alluring fragrance between their breaths, Liang Yue unconsciously closed his eyes and slowly leaned back. His originally furrowed brow gradually smoothed out, as if he was about to fall asleep. When Liang Yue-chan comes to pick us up later, can you bring a few more people with you? Teacher Shizuka hugged his arm and rested her head on his shoulder as she asked, her cute face showing a hint of anticipation. That shouldn't be a problem, as long as they're willing. That's right, isn't it, system? While responding to teacher Shizuka, Liang Yue asked the system in his mind with a slightly guilty conscience sting. There are 3 ways for the host to bring natives from the trial world. Which 3? First, the host can obtain corresponding contracts, enslavement, summoning, and other types of props through the system store or lottery. Second, after the host's stronghold world is upgraded to a certain stage, the host can initiate a recruitment order to the natives through world connection or other special function settings. The conditions for recruitment are generally that the host has experienced the world before, and that the target agrees. Third, when the host's own strength is strong enough, they can break the barriers between planes and bring the natives of other worlds into their own world. It's pretty much what I thought. The last of the 3 methods is obviously unreliable. By the time I'm strong enough to break the plane barriers, it'll be the year of the monkey. Shizuka and the others might be dead by then. The randomness of the first method is too great. It depends on luck and financial resources. But the second one, system, can you explain in detail the second method of recruiting through the stronghold world, Ling? After the first plane hunting trial, that is, after this trial ends, the system will release corresponding stronghold world upgrade tasks. At that time, the host can improve their mastery of the stronghold world by completing tasks and directly possessing higher authority over the stronghold world. Please experience the specific content yourself at that time. Stronghold world upgrade task? If it's the McG world, it shouldn't be too difficult, right? After about 5 minutes, Yusuji Masiko and Shizuka, who were enjoying the quiet time in someone's arms, suddenly felt empty under them. The 2 women were startled and opened their eyes, only to see that Liang Yue had disappeared into thin air. Liang Yue-chan, did you leave already? I thought there would be some kind of anomaly. After all, it's a world-class event like traveling through worlds. Teacher Shizuka, wearing a rabbit reconnaissance hat, looked dazed. Her charming face still showing a hint of disappointment. Senior Tsubuki, upon hearing this, smiled softly and reached out to stroke the soft rabbit fur. Actually, from another point of view, the more earth-shattering events are in our eyes, the more lightly they can be handled, which proves that great existence is even more beyond imagination. Oh, eh? It seems that's indeed how it is. After a burst of light and shadow changes, Liang Yue found himself back in the basement of the McWorld, still carrying the fragrance of the 2 women on him. The originally soft bed under him had now turned into a cold stone slab. However, compared to himself a month ago, Liang Yue was now completely different. The changes in his body and the faint sense of fatigue in his spirit were all proving this. Getting up from the ground, he hadn't taken a few steps before he lay down again on the bed in the corner of the basement. At this time, Liang Yue's whole body was like it had lost its bones. Completely relaxing system, settle the task rewards for meeting. After testing, in the main task quantity produces quality, the host ultimately completed the task with more than 10 times the number stipulated by the task, reaching the promotion conditions. In this regard, the task reward given by the system is to obtain the task points multiplied by 10. In addition, the host can add a keyword to the task lottery, this time to influence the scope of the prize selection. Ding. After testing, in the side task close bodyguard, The host successfully protected the safety of more than 5 plot protagonists during the task period. Therefore, you will receive a task reward of 300 task points and a treasure talisman for item upgrading task points multiplied by 10. Designate the lottery scope. This time it's a wave of wealth, a total of 5,300 points for the 2 tasks. I'm afraid I won't be short of this in a short time. Designate the scope of the lottery. Let's draw it first. System, I want to draw a lottery. Ling. Please provide a keyword with Liang Yue's order. The familiar roulette immediately popped up in front of his eyes. However, compared to the previous 2 lotteries, the various items dotted on the roulette wheel, at this time, each pointer area was covered with a mist, vaguely making it difficult to see clearly. Scope magic. Wait a minute. System, if I specify the magic scope, what kind of things will probably come out? Ling. The keyword magic is not an accurate range term. Any items, consumables, and materials related to magic are within the lottery range then magical? This seems even more off. System, do you have any suggestions? Please make your own choice. Host cultivation? Tisk, secret manuals or something? It doesn't seem like they can be immediately converted into combat power, and I estimate that I can't draw anything good now. If that's the case, I might as well choose a skill. Ding. Keyword skill, please confirm whether the host confirms. Confirm. Chapter 58 Item Upgrade Talisman. As Liang Yue gave the order, the mist on the large turntable in front of him immediately dissipated, revealing various icons within each pointer area. Scanning the dazzling array of skills, Liang Yue felt a wave of dizziness and his eyes crossed, making it impossible to discern what was what. Helpless, he had no choice but to give up the struggle. Start. Stop. Hopefully, this time I'll have better luck and get a more practical skill, at least one that's usable. Just as he muttered to himself, the black turntable in front of him came to a complete standstill, leaving only the red pointer in the center spinning non-stop, tugging at Liang Yue's heart with each rotation. Slowly, the pointer's inertia seemed to finally reach its end. Finally, under his watchful gaze, it stopped on a certain abstract icon. Ding. Congratulations, host, for obtaining the auxiliary general skill observation in this lottery welfare. Do you wish to claim the reward? Claim. The observation skill is indeed practical, but it can't be used in combat, and with the thought that it was a blessing, not a curse, Liang Yue weakly flopped onto the bed and sat up, leaning against a pillow. Instantly, as his command was issued, the skill, represented by an icon of an eye in a style similar to Oracle Bone script, flew directly from the turntable. Then, it transformed into a beam of white light and entered his forehead. In that instant, Liang Yue felt as if his eyes had undergone some inexplicable change at that moment. When he looked at the things in front of him, he seemed to have an urge to explore and investigate. This feeling was very subtle, only to be understood, not to be expressed in words. Unlike the massive flow of information related to skill training that the system had instilled in him when he received the ricochet skill, the information attached to this observation skill was very scarce. Besides the basic information of the skill, there were only some precautions for use, and the observation skill itself seemed to have become an innate ability of Liang Yue's the moment it entered his body. Observation, a common skill in game-type planes. It can be successfully cast after consuming a certain amount of energy or mental power. The higher the skill level, the more detailed the information that can be observed. Level 110 current level. 1 skill proficiency. 0-100 PS, everything can be observed, but in the current lowest state, it can only be used to view the physical state of people and things. It can also be activated by consuming mental power, which saves me a lot of trouble. After reading the skill's information, Liang Yue immediately turned over, and with a flip of his sleeve, a large firearm was taken out of his storage space. Looking at the dark object in front of him, this guy immediately moved his mind and threw an observation skill at it. M134 minigun, uses 7.62mm caliber bullets, with a maximum rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, a gun weight of 15.9 kilograms, and an effective range of 800 meters. Not bad. For now, this skill is roughly equivalent to a free Baidu search engine, maybe a little weaker, but it's still a skill that's used very frequently, and it can also be upgraded in terms of mental power consumption. In my current state, I can probably use it about 20 times. Feeling the consumption of energy in his mind for that instant, Liang Yue blinked his eyes twice and nodded thoughtfully. Then, he threw the machine gun in his hand back into the storage space, and with another flip of his sleeve, an inconspicuous yellow slip of paper appeared in his palm. This was exactly the other reward he received after completing the side quest, the item upgrade talisman system. How do I use this thing? Can it be used as a reinforcement charm in a game? Looking at the talisman, which had no patterns or embellishments on the surface, Liang Yue was very curious. The item upgrade talisman is not a reinforcement charm. It cannot be used to enhance the power of weapons and equipment like in some games. The talisman itself can improve and expand the capabilities of the selected item to a limited extent. Please experience it yourself. Host. Then, what value can this talisman reach in your assessment? Please check the system shop yourself. Host. System shop? Oh. You've treated this talisman as a consumable and put it on the shelves. Hearing what the system said, Liang Yue quickly summoned the system shop interface in his mind. At a glance, he almost immediately found the location of the yellow talisman among the few items. Then, glancing down, this guy was immediately startled. It costs 1,000 points to buy one. Seeing the 3 zeros clearly marked, Liang Yue subconsciously looked again at the few items next to it that could be obtained for only about 100 points. Immediately, he became more cautious about the small piece of paper in his hand. Not a reinforcement charm, but it can be used to upgrade items. Moreover, the system seemed to say just now that this thing can't be used to enhance the power of equipment, but it can improve and expand the capabilities of the selected item. Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but sink into deep thought again. First of all, consumables such as guns and iron swords definitely cannot be upgraded with the upgrade talisman, not to mention whether these types of weapons are worthy of a talisman worth 1,000 points. If you just want to increase their power, the most direct way is actually to change to a better one, just like the pistol he used to use in the Apocalypse world. He could completely change it to Vulcan Gatling, absolutely doubling the power. As for the standard iron sword under the mech system, wouldn't it be better to directly change to a diamond sword? If weapons and equipment are not suitable, then for me, I can only try tools now. Thinking of this, Liang Yue flipped his sleeve, and an iron pickaxe immediately appeared in his hand. But then this guy shook his head. He flipped his palm again, and then with a thud, a toolbox used to make these iron pickaxes and iron swords was immediately placed in front of the bed. It's you. Liang Yue threw the talisman in his hand onto the toolbox, and then saw the talisman twist as it fell, turning into a ball of yellow-orange light, slowly enveloping the entire toolbox. Then, little by little, it merged into the interior of the toolbox. At this time, the light seemed a bit dazzling, but it didn't make any sound. Quite like a silent rain moisturizing things, some unknown changes were quietly taking place. Then, for more than a minute, Liang Yue squatted on the bed, focusing all his attention on the entire process, until the vision in front of him completely disappeared. Is it over? From the outside, it doesn't seem to have changed much. When the light completely merged into the toolbox, Liang Yue couldn't help but feel a little muttered to himself, thinking, "Don't tell me the upgrade failed, wasting my talisman." So he quickly leaned over and opened the toolbox to take a look. Oh, I see. Looking at the inside of the box, after a moment, Liang Yue nodded as if he understood something. At this time, only to see inside the toolbox, the original 9 independent space grids, arranged in the order of the 9 palace grid. The production bar now, it has become 16, and arranged there in equal parts according to a 4x4 square layout. Chapter 59. What is the difference between the special cat and the enhancement talisman? System, how do I use this thing now? Liang Yue looked at the toolbox in front of him with shining eyes, his hands unconsciously rubbing together. Although he had vaguely anticipated the wonders of these 16 crafting slots, he still subconsciously asked the system for guidance. Please explore on your own. Host. Alright, then let me explore it properly myself. First, I have to try the tool recipes from before the upgrade to see if I can still make them. 2 wooden sticks plus 3 iron ingots equal 1 iron pickaxe. No problem. Then, 2 wooden sticks plus 3 iron ingots, slightly adjusted, equal 1 iron axe. Nice. And then, 3 wooden blocks plus 3 wool, equal 1 bed. Looks like it still works. That is to say, the upgraded toolbox still recognizes its original synthesis recipes. So, now let's try something new. 1 wooden stick plus 2 iron ingots, placed vertically together, equals 1 standard iron sword. But now, if I increase the iron ingots to 3, hey? It's also a sword. Is this a greatsword, a longsword, or should I call it a two-handed sword? It's just a bit longer and thicker than the standard iron sword, and I don't know its other attributes yet. Then let's see. 2 wooden sticks plus 2 iron ingots. Damn! It actually synthesized a horse-chopping sword? What's the principle behind this? What about 3 pieces of wood plus 1 iron ingot? As expected, it's a spear. 4 wooden blocks plus 4 wool. Still a bed, but the style is a bit bigger than before. Is this a double bed? Then there's armor, shields, and things like that. Leather, wood, iron ingots, eh? This is really interesting. The defensive gear made in the 16-slot toolbox uses more materials, but the size hasn't changed. Did it all go into the craftsmanship? Now that you mention it, I just realized that whether it's defensive gear, beds, or various weapons, after using more materials, in addition to some changes in shape, the craftsmanship seems to be more refined. No, let me take a closer look again. Wait. The 16-slot toolbox already has so many new changes. What if I upgrade it again? Thinking of this, Liang Yue's eyes suddenly flashed with brilliance. With a thought, the system store was summoned again. System, if I want to continue using upgrade talismans to upgrade this toolbox, the success rate will definitely decrease. Right. Resting his fist on his chin, Liang Yue sat there in a thinker's pose and tentatively asked the system, as the saying goes, riches are found in danger. Success or failure, this one depends on you. Holding the newly bought upgrade talisman between his fingers, Liang Yue looked at the seemingly unremarkable toolbox in front of him, and then threw the talisman on it in the blink of an eye. Dazzling brilliance once again enveloped the entire box, and then gradually merged into it. However, Liang Yue, who had watched the first upgrade process before, keenly noticed that the current upgrade and fusion progress seemed to have slowed down a lot. Moreover, during the fusion process, the 16 toolboxes in front of him seemed to have begun to show some not-so-obvious rejection reactions when that dazzling brilliance merged into it. There would always be a tiny bit of light that would be reflected back by the box in an invisible way, although this part of the reflected light could never break through the thin film of the outer layer of brilliance. It would eventually merge into the toolbox in the tug-of-war and rebound between each other, but the appearance of this phenomenon really surprised Liang Yue. This really corresponded to what the system said before. The higher the level of the item, the lower the success rate of the upgrade, but it's not even +3 yet. It shouldn't be time to prepare pads, right? After about 3 minutes or so, the toolbox in front of him finally completed the upgrade. Liang Yue couldn't wait to open the box to take a look. Sure enough, 5 by 5 horizontally and vertically, a total of 25 independent space slots, neatly arranged there. Tisk. By the way, should I do it again? If it succeeds, wouldn't the quality of the creations produced from this toolbox be even better? Thinking of this, Liang Yue subconsciously looked at the more than 4,000 points left in his wallet, and his heart suddenly felt like a feather was stuffed in it. Itchy. In the end, after much deliberation, the desire in this guy's heart still successfully defeated reason. A brand new item upgrade talisman soon appeared in his palm. Anyway, there are still 3,300 points left in my wallet. If I save a little, it will definitely be no problem to last until the next trial world opens. Swipe. Throwing the talisman in his hand onto the toolbox again, Liang Yue then sat on the bed with his knees hugged, staring at the brightly shining box in front of him. His chest rose and fell slightly, and his face unconsciously flushed slightly. The whole person looked like a gambler who was waiting for the dice to be revealed. This upgrade process seemed to have become a bit unsuccessful compared to the previous phenomenon of only slight reflection of brilliance. The brilliance transformed from the talisman and the toolbox at this time seemed to have evolved into opposing sides fighting each other. During the second half of the entire upgrade, the box of the toolbox even began to shake slightly, constantly making clucking sounds, as if it might crack at any time. Liang Yue was terrified watching from the side. Fortunately, the toolbox finally held on. After spending more than 10 minutes, it finally successfully merged with all the brilliance. He hurriedly reached out and opened the lid of the toolbox to take a look. A full 36 independent toolbars. Nice. At this time, this 6x6 grid toolbar undoubtedly had a huge advantage compared to the previous one. Just like under the same size, the higher the resolution of a map, the richer the content it can present. Within the current 36-slot toolbox, Liang Yue can independently arrange and design certain detailed changes for the creations in the toolbox. For example, by slightly changing the combination formula of an iron sword and shifting the iron ingot originally located at the tip of the sword by 1 grid. A slightly curved Miao sword with an arc can be made. Chapter 60. Back to school. As expected of a treasure charm produced by the system, it's truly magical. With this, the creations under the MAC rules become even more operable. Liang Yue stood in the corner of the basement, looking at the various weapons he had placed against the wall, subconsciously stroking his chin, his eyes shining brightly. After more than half an hour of experimentation, he had now basically figured out the combination principle of the 36-grid toolbox. If the original MAC 9-grid toolbox still had a certain amount of unknown ambiguity in its operation and use, then the upgraded toolbox was becoming more and more like an alchemic mold that could independently synthesize various tools without the need for temperature-based smelting. When using it, as long as the corresponding materials are placed in those space grids according to the shape of an item or weapon tool. More often than not, the corresponding finished product can be successfully synthesized. Moreover, the quality and workmanship of this finished tool are much better than the stuff made in the original version of the toolbox. However, correspondingly, more materials are needed to synthesize items in this 36-grid toolbox. Fortunately, Liang Yue now possesses the entire Stronghold world, and can also scavenge from other dimensional planes every now and then, so he doesn't care about the consumption of these raw materials. I just don't know if materials from other places besides the stones, iron, gold, and diamonds originally produced in the Mech world can be synthesized in this toolbox. For example, adamantium alloy, or vibranium or something. Tisk. Why didn't I think about that before? Having made up his mind to find an opportunity to try it out as soon as possible, Liang Yue, without realizing it, had already turned into a yawning, teary-eyed wreck. Well, I'm really a bit tired. Let's talk about the experiment tomorrow. Adamantium is too rare, but some copper, aluminum, silver, or titanium alloys, carbon steel and other alloy metals are easy to obtain. I have to think about it carefully later. Just as this guy muttered to himself and returned to the bedside, about to climb up and have a good, sound sleep, a thought suddenly flashed through Liang Yue's mind. Then he returned to the corner where the various new weapons were piled up, forcing himself to endure the huge sense of emptiness in his mind. Liang Yue staggered back to the bedside and fell down. As soon as his body touched the soft wool blanket, he immediately fell into deep sleep. By the way, system, how long did this experience take me in total? I'm talking about in reality. In an instant, this question suddenly popped out from the bottom of his heart, and then Liang Yue relied on his strong willpower to suddenly open his eyes and sit up from the bed again. If this question wasn't clarified, I'm afraid he would have a hard time sleeping soundly at this moment. About less than a second. That's good. After receiving the system's reply, Liang Yue felt relieved, so he lay back on the bed, closed his eyes and prepared to fall asleep. It's just that for some reason, even though he was desperately sleepy before, and there was no energy in his head, he couldn't fall asleep now no matter what. Not only that, Liang Yue also suddenly realized at this time that he now seemed to have just taken a perfect tonic pill. Not only was his whole body full of strength and his body comfortable, but even his already drowsy brain had become exceptionally clear and full of energy. The only discomfort was probably from his stomach. Gradually, a feeling of hunger quickly occupied his entire body and mind. My stamina and energy have recovered as soon as I touched the bed. Although this bed is a bit magical, it shouldn't be so powerful, right? Rubbing his stomach, which had already begun to rumble faintly, Liang Yue immediately climbed out of bed with a suspicious look on his face. After a while, this guy suddenly thought of something, and quickly returned to the ground from the basement. At this time, the world outside the house was already a scene of bright daylight, rolling wheat waves, and cattle, sheep, pigs, and chickens leisurely strolling. If Liang Yue remembered correctly, the time he went to High School of the Dead should have been around midnight, and then this round trip took less than a second. But now it was obviously a scene of bright morning light. I really didn't expect that. With one blink of an eye, a night's time would pass like this. I'm really a bit of a pig, but fortunately, the bed in the Mech world has one excellent point, that is, as long as you go to bed at night and wake up, the time will definitely only be in the morning of the next day. In this magical world, there is no such thing as sleeping in or oversleeping. So, when Liang Yue had eaten a hearty breakfast, and took an oversized lunch, and left home with his school bag on his back, the time in the real world was only just past 6 o'clock. At this time, he had plenty of buffer time to rush to the main road outside the block to wait for the school bus. Speaking of which, although there is a school bus, it's very convenient to go to and from school. But shouldn't I also buy a car? In fact, cars in the United States are almost just a necessary means of transportation for every household, either a four-wheeled car or a motorcycle. Only people like Liang Yue, who are still students, don't worry about this kind of thing. In addition, living in New York City, an international city, developed public transportation is also a good choice. But sometimes, a private vehicle with strong privacy is also indispensable, especially for someone like Liang Yue, who is full of secrets. There is a car stored in the garage, but that's Mom's red Beetle. The feminine characteristics are too obvious. I really can't drive it out. How much money do I have on me now, including the living expenses my mom gave me for a year? It seems like I exchanged a total of $150,000 before going abroad. Before, I ran around with Aunt Liu, purchasing various household items and appliances. Now there should be about $120,000 left if I want to buy a car in the United States. Even if it's a slightly better one, it can be done within $100,000. But even so, There won't be much left for myself. It seems that I have to find a way to make money. A day of classes quickly ended in the hustle and bustle of Holland, Sam, and others. In the afternoon, around 3 o'clock, Liang Yue, as usual, came to the school's Kendo Club headquarters after a field training in the apocalypse world. His strength and swordsmanship at this time is naturally no longer comparable to yesterday's self. It can be said that, whether it is from the momentum, strength, or accuracy of the moves, with a blessing of the basic swordsmanship skill, Liang Yue is definitely stronger than everyone in this high school campus. Chapter 61 Double Sword Flow. Holding a wooden practice sword in his hand, Liang Yue was now single-mindedly and mercilessly beating the mannequin in front of him from various directions and angles: chop, slash, stab, point, pat, flick. Almost every move targeted the vital parts of the mannequin, continuous, extremely fast, and with extremely high accuracy. Each strike produced a dull thud. Even with a professional fixed base, it couldn't keep the mannequin stable. It was constantly being hit, swaying left and right, its whole body trembling. In just a moment, countless mottled marks appeared on the special mannequin in front of him. The power of his sword and the ferocity of his energy made the third-year club members who were standing beside him taking a break secretly click their tongues and subconsciously take a few steps back, as if afraid that someone in front of them, after practicing too hard, would get a hothead, lose control of himself, and accidentally injure them. In fact, accidental injury was naturally impossible at this time. Liang Yue, although seemingly working up a fierce energy, was launching a cathartic practice offensive against the mannequin. But for him, who had experienced real combat training and whose physical fitness had comprehensively exceeded the limits of the human body, it was just a warm-up exercise. It was far from reaching the state of giving his all. Thus, about 15 minutes later, after Liang Yue felt his body starting to heat up and his chest began to rise and fall slightly, he slowly stopped the slashing movements. Then, with a slight frown, he looked at the wooden sword in his hand, feeling puzzled in his heart. I still feel a little unaccustomed, as if something is missing. Is it because the iron sword has been replaced with a wooden sword, or is it because the target of the attack has become a fixed mannequin? It doesn't seem quite right. The problem seems to lie in my own body balance. Yes, that should be it. Body balance. After a moment of thought, Liang Yue quickly found where his problem lay, and then understood the reason behind it. The reason why I feel awkward is probably because my left hand isn't holding anything. After all, when I was in the apocalypse world, I always held a shield in one hand and a sword in the other, and the weight on both hands wasn't light. Now suddenly switching to a one-handed sword, and a wooden one at that, it would be strange if I were used to it. Thinking of this, Liang Yue subconsciously looked around. He saw that at least 20 club members were gathered in the Kendo Club's practice room at this time. Some were practicing against the mannequins, some were resting and drinking water, some were standing there in a daze, some were playing on their phones, some were gathered together bragging and farting, scattered here and there doing various things. But after all, there were many people and many eyes. If he suddenly took out a shield at this time, he would definitely become the focus of everyone's attention. Forget it, it's better to keep a low profile, otherwise I might be regarded as a psychopath. Thinking of this, Liang Yue had no choice but to settle for the next best thing in order to not waste time. He walked to the weapon rack in the corner and took another wooden sword, and then started playing dual wielding. This seems to be a bug, albeit a small one. In addition, Liang Yue's physical fitness has now comprehensively surpassed the limits of ordinary people. After all, the numbers after those four-dimensional attributes are not just for show. The increase in each attribute also means a corresponding improvement in one's own qualities among them. In addition to the most direct strength and agility, it also includes complex qualities such as feel, eyesight, control, coordination, reaction, and perception. This is far more elusive than the data seen on that simple attribute panel. Under the combination of these physical and mental qualities, Liang Yue quickly adapted to the dual-wielding mode. At least, his body wouldn't feel sluggish or unbalanced when he wielded the swords, and as time went on and his practice deepened, his control over this dual-wielding style gradually improved. About half an hour later, after a period of exploration and experience, Liang Yue finally established a set of dual-wielding modes suitable for himself. The left-hand sword assists and defends, the right-hand sword attacks, or vice versa. When the left-hand sword attacks, the right hand must switch to defensive mode. In short, it is necessary to always maintain a situation that combines offense and defense. In this way, it is somewhat similar to the feeling of holding a sword with a shield. However, this dual-wielding method seems to be really cool. Even my body feels eager to try, and my heart is surging. Liang Yue had a faint premonition at this time that he seemed to have inadvertently found a close combat path that was more suitable for him compared to the previous single sword slashing and shield defense. The current dual sword mode seems to be able to better exert his own advantages. This was an inexplicable feeling that had been rapidly fermenting deep in his heart since he began to hold the dual swords in his hands. It was as if he was born to walk this path. However, it still seems a bit insufficient. Not only is there a lack of proficiency in holding the swords, but even the swords themselves feel a bit awkward. Looking at the two wooden swords in his hands, Liang Yue held his breath and concentrated, constantly holding them in his hands in both forward and reverse directions, flexibly twisting his wrists, carefully feeling the subtle differences. In order to find a more comfortable sword-holding feel, Liang Yue, come and practice with me. Just at this moment, a voice suddenly came from the direction of the club activity room's door. He knew without looking that the owner of this voice was Elizabeth, and what he knew even more was that for a newly transferred Chinese boy like himself, being called by such a beautiful woman with a great figure and appearance to be a sparring partner, in fact, it had already aroused quite a bit of envy, jealousy, and hatred among a group of people in the Kendo club in front of him. Almost instantly, sharp gazes converged from the surroundings, constantly wandering between him and the blonde beauty at the door. A sense of resentment was rising in the hearts of this group of single dogs with excessive hormone secretion. If gazes and emotions could kill, Liang Yue dared to bet that even if he possessed a data-driven body under the McRules, rules, he would definitely have been tortured to death thousands of times in this instant. Unfortunately, Liang Yue didn't care at all, so, after putting down the wooden swords in his hand, this guy walked to the other party's side with a thick face under everyone's gaze, and then put his hand on Elizabeth's supple waist at the same time. He secretly stretched his other hand behind his back and silently gave the middle finger to the dissatisfied people behind him. FVCK, oh shat, this kid is too arrogant, I'm going to teach him a lesson. A burst of unwilling wolf howls suddenly sounded in the Kendo club, one after another, some daring, some angry, and some even cheering. It's a pity that although they are shouting happily now, no one can take the lead for the time being. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 World Upgrade Quests. In a short while, the two had arrived at a practice room belonging to the Mixed Martial Arts Club. The floor was covered with moderately soft padding, and the walls were adorned with custom-made large mirrors. Almost spotless sunlight streamed in through the glass windows, and the air faintly carried a delicate rose fragrance. Clearly, the room had just been cleaned not long ago. However, the practice room was currently empty, which was almost always the case when Liang Yue accompanied the blonde beauty beside him for close combat practice. Nevertheless, compared to himself before going to Apocalyptic World, he had made significant progress, relying on his agility and stamina, which far surpassed ordinary people. Liang Yue could now clearly sense, through his increasingly sharp senses and intuition, the surroundings of this practice room and the wooden room next door, and outside the wall beyond the glass windows. Several people were standing quietly at this moment. They were as still as mountains, breathing evenly, and seemed to have no hostility towards him, but stood there like guards, protecting this room. These people are protecting Elizabeth, right? Bodyguards sent by her family. Speaking of which, what does this girl's family actually do? With this kind of entourage, they must be a wealthy family at the very least. Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but stretch, his gaze curiously directed towards the blonde girl beside him, who was facing away from him, doing pre-exercise stretches at the same time. With a thought, an observation skill was instantly cast. Elizabeth Schwart, a 17-year-old noblewoman of the English royal family, a branch of the royal family, whose bloodline can be traced back to James I. She has been intelligent since childhood and is deeply loved by the elders of the royal family. It is rumored that she also possesses some unknown talent. Looking at the information returned by the observation skill on the light screen in front of him, Liang Yue's eyes narrowed slightly, and his original casual attitude disappeared instantly. Instead of going to noble school, what is she doing here at this public high school, England? In my memory, it seems that besides being beaten by the Dark Elves when the 9 realms overlapped, there doesn't seem to be much worth noting over there, right? After all, this is the Marvel Universe. Could it be Stonehenge? In the Transformers plot, those stones seem to be coordinates, but Sam hasn't even made his fortune yet. Moreover, that plot doesn't seem to have much to do with Elizabeth at all. Could it be that this girl just wants to find excitement, in order to break free from the shackles of her family? and have a love affair on the spur of the moment. Don't dream I'm not even in the same circle as her, and besides, if she really wants to find someone to try the taste of love, there are probably plenty of people around eager to lick the boots of the English royal family. Besides, Elizabeth's scent seems similar to Senior Z's, that faint fragrance, which means she's not a promiscuous person looking at it this way. Could the problem lie with me? Did I inadvertently reveal some secret, or is it that her old Liang family is originally an reclusive wealthy family unknown to ordinary people? Just as Liang Yue was shamelessly sitting on the padding beneath him, lost in thought, a slight rustling sound suddenly came from behind him immediately afterward. A pair of delicate and slender hands slowly reached around from behind his neck, then tightened. Two well-proportioned and powerful legs wrapped around his waist, tightly intertwined. In this way, the person behind him used a rear naked choke, instantly immobilizing Liang Yue. HMPH. You actually spaced out while practicing with me, huh? Elizabeth's voice was heard, and her whole body was like a tightly wound spring, vigorously moving her limbs, trying to force Liang Yue to lie backward. Then, she actually couldn't move him no matter how hard the blonde beauty behind him tried to exert force, how much she used the advantages of her whole body, plus some leverage principles that are said to be scientifically based. She couldn't shake him at all. Liang Yue was still sitting there calmly. He simply reached out and pulled the arm wrapped around his neck forward, and Elizabeth, who had originally touched the ground and was flushed, immediately fell back onto his back. Then Liang Yue made a nimble turn, grabbing her hands and holding the blonde girl entirely in his arms, looking at her with a smile that was not quite a smile. How is it? Are you convinced? This is unscientific. You were clearly not this strong yesterday. Saying that, Elizabeth, with a face full of suspicion and shock, reached out and repeatedly pressed on several key points on the person's shoulders, arms, chest, and waist. Controlling the strength of the body, she meticulously tested Liang Yue's muscle strength, without any regard for the distinction between men and women in the process. In the end, this woman even propped up her tall nose and sniffed him hard, as if a hunting dog was confirming the identity of its prey. After a long time, she sat down with a face full of unwillingness, pouting at Liang Yue, and said, "How did you become so strong? It feels like any jiu-jitsu lock has no effect on you anymore. I had some breakthroughs after going home yesterday." Hearing this, Liang Yue naturally couldn't tell the truth to this girl, so he said vaguely, "Could it be that you really cultivated some kind of technique from your Eastern world? But the effect is too good. Just overnight, it feels like you have broken through the limits of ordinary people and reached another level." This is a secret. It's not easy to say specifically. Besides, don't you also have many secrets? HMPH, in a few days, I want to visit your house. There's no need for visits. Anyway, I'm the only one at home. You're welcome anytime. After spending some more time with this girl in the practice room, Liang Yue then squeezed onto the bus to go home. The matter of buying a car should indeed be put on the agenda. I'll go take a look in a couple of days on the weekend. And then there's the matter of making money. For someone like me who possesses countless resources, it would be too low to engage in buy and sell business, and besides, it wouldn't be easy to sell it even if I took it out. Then if I really want to take hard currency like gold or large diamonds to gold shop or auction house, it would be easy to be targeted, and the origin would be even harder to explain. Moreover, I'm not doing a one-off deal here. Or should I write a novel like before? That's fine. After all, I'm a cultured person. On the way, just as Liang Yue was standing in the middle of the crowd, considering the matter of making money, a thought suddenly came to mind at this moment, so he quickly asked in his mind, "Right system. Didn't you say before that after returning from the first trial, you would release the upgrade mission for the base world?" Chapter 63, A Song of Ice and Fire. A Song of Ice and Fire. Nope. Let's check. Game of Thrones still no nice. If the book title isn't there, then let's look for characters in the book, like Ned Stark. Nope. Littlefinger. Still no. Yes. Next, let's look for famous quotes from this novel. Lannister. A Lannister always pays his debts. Nope. Winter is coming. Still no. Okay, so it looks like the book A Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones definitely doesn't exist in this American comic world, so don't blame me for being impolite. At this moment, Liang Yue was sitting on the sofa in the living room with a silly smile on his face, with a laptop on his lap, preparing to start his writing plan. But before officially starting to write, he certainly had to confirm whether this work already existed in the world before him. If this point wasn't checked in advance, the consequences would be quite serious. Otherwise, at best, the manuscript would be scrapped and all previous efforts would be wasted. At worst, his reputation would be ruined, and he might even end up in jail. But apparently, Liang Yue's luck was not bad in the process of its development. The American comic world in front of him, it is not known which link produced the error. The old man who created A Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones probably hasn't found his inspiration yet, so, in order to solve his current embarrassing situation of being short of money, Liang Yue was prepared to learn from his predecessors to take it by stealth one step ahead. The original author of this Ice and Fire novel is said to be preparing to complete this work in 7 parts. Before I transmigrated, 5 novels had been published successively, and some chapters of the 6th part had already been circulated on the internet. I probably won't be able to see the 7th part in this lifetime. Fortunately, the TV series had already aired its finale. The script for the final step had even been released in advance by hackers, so even if I improvise, it shouldn't be too different from the original author's ideas. Thinking of this, Liang Yue no longer hesitated. After creating a document, he began to frantically tap on the keyboard, relying on his memory, which was already superhuman and almost reached the level of photographic memory. Liang Yue, who had read the original novel more than once, was like a godsend at this time. Ideas flowed like a spring, and he wrote freely. His slender and powerful fingers instantly danced a layer of phantom on the keyboard inside the living room. The crisp sound of keystrokes almost became one. Words began to be presented on the document along with his memory. In just half an hour, Liang Yue had already written tens of thousands of words, and after gradually adapting to the writing differences between Chinese and English, his typing speed was still soaring. Time passed bit by bit. Unconsciously, the sky outside the window had changed from dusk to night. The room was now in darkness, only the computer screen in front of him was still flickering with light. He was so engrossed in typing that he didn't notice this change at all. What a miscalculation, wasting so much time in vain. Looking at the crescent moon gradually rising from the horizon in the Mick world at this time, Liang Yue couldn't help but feel a bit of wry smile on his face. The time flow in the Mick world is twice that of reality. In other words, although he enjoyed typing so much at home, from dusk to midnight, he also lost about a quarter of a day for nothing. Okay, I can go to bed earlier after coding for a while, but before going to bed, I have to use up all my mental power. I really underestimated the observation skill before. I will try to improve the level as soon as possible. Task name, Biodiversity, Plant Edition. Task requirements, collect more than 1,000 kinds of plant seeds, seedlings or mature plants, introduce them into the stronghold world for planting, and ensure their survival and reproduction. Task reward, land and ocean. Time flies, and 2 days have passed in a blink of an eye. After entrusting the first 3 novels of Ice and Fire to Aunt Liu, Liang Yue has finally gained some free time and hurried to deal with the task of upgrading the stronghold world just as he had thought before, as a world that he already owned. The so-called world upgrade task sounds very high-end, but the specific implementation is not difficult. Moreover, although the Mick world has a unique collection and creation module, which is enough to help Liang Yue accomplish some projects that seem incredible to ordinary people, but its overall power level is not very high, which also determines that the requirements for upgrading the stronghold world will not be too harsh, and will not give any too magical upgrade requirements, at least in the initial stage. It is like this. Because of this, after Liang Yue received the world upgrade task from the system before, he did not rush to act immediately, but instead prioritized making money. This kind of task must not be rushed. More than 1,000 kinds of plants are not so easy to find. Aside from the hundreds of vegetables, fruits, and flowers that are more common in life, each of the remaining species must be well planned. Well, appropriately introducing some medicinal herbs and spices should be a good choice. Even if I don't consider selling them at that time, keeping them for my own use is also a good choice. It seems I should go to Chinatown without a word along the way. He took a taxi and soon came to a car dealership in the north of Brooklyn. As a person who had actually experienced the doomsday crisis in the apocalypse world, Liang Yue subconsciously focused his attention on brands with good protection and safe and domineering models. After entering the car dealership, among them, the Hummer, a brand that had protected most of his journey in Takaname City, was the most valued by him. In the process, he just glanced at those fancy but useless sports cars and sedans, and hurriedly skipped them, unwilling to spend any time on them soon. In about half an hour, Liang Yue had completed all the purchase procedures, and then drove his first official vehicle in this life towards his destination. Not surprisingly, this guy is now driving a deep red Hummer H2. Compared to the H1 that Nanji Xiong had extremely modified in the apocalypse, the model he bought is larger, and the shape and design structure are also more biased towards SUV-like multi-purpose vehicles. In addition, the high fuel consumption of the H2, which almost overwhelms all similar models and brands, has also been well known for a long time. This consumption alone can make many car lovers flinch, so much so that even Liang Yue, a layman who doesn't know much about cars, has heard of it. Fortunately, in the current American comic world, Liang Yue is considered a landlord class. Chapter 64 Wine Barrels from the World of Stardew Valley. Unfortunately, barely half an hour after Liang Yue started driving, he encountered a common annoyance for car owners: traffic jam. Through the bright windshield, a seemingly endless stream of vehicles of various sizes and colors was jammed on the main road ahead, stretching to the horizon. They only moved forward about 10 meters every 5 or 6 minutes in this fast-paced international metropolis where efficiency is life. Don't expect people to have much patience. Making money is the city's main theme. Sure enough, in no time, the piercing sounds of car horns had become a chorus on this congested road. Some drivers with bad tempers were even sticking their heads out of the driver's seat, cursing and swearing incessantly. Liang Yue, meanwhile, was leaning against the wide car seat, his arm resting on the door frame, looking sideways at the bus that was speeding along the dedicated lane next to him, unimpeded. At the same time, as the thought entered his mind, the system screen appeared before his eyes. Observation, a common skill in game-like dimensions. It can be successfully cast after consuming a certain amount of energy or mental power. The higher the skill level, the more detailed the information that can be observed. Level 210 current level. 2 skill proficiency. 4 300 PS, everything can be observed, but in the current low-level state, it can only be used to view the physical state of people and objects, and vaguely detect a trace of abnormal reactions. Liang Yue strength, 25 agility, 38 constitution, 26 energy, 45 talent. After these past few days of persistent effort, the observation skill had unsurprisingly reached level 2 last night before he fell asleep. At the same time, after using the skill for some time, Liang Yue had somewhat summarized some operational experience regarding the skill. That is, the increase in skill proficiency seems to be related to the object he observes. If Liang Yue were still like before, randomly using the observation skill on stones, iron ingots, and the weapons he personally made, just to fool around, then, in terms of skill proficiency, it would only increase by 1 point each time. Symbolically, only when the observed targets are people or things that he was originally unfamiliar with will the use of observation get a leap forward. There is a multiple difference between the two, but each skill release consumes the same amount of mental power. Based on Liang Yue's current energy attribute baseline, he can release observation about 30 times a day. Once this release amount is exceeded, this guy will immediately fall into coma due to excessive mental power consumption. As for whether this kind of mental damage will cause any harm to Liang Yue's body, he himself has not yet noticed anyway. As long as he sleeps on the bed in Mick, it will immediately recover the next day. However, with a continuous consumption and recovery of his mental power in the past few days, it seems that Liang Yue's energy has been somewhat roughly trained. As a result, his energy attribute has unknowingly increased by 2 points. Incidentally, even his constitution has mysteriously increased by 1 point. Simply amazing. That's right, another 3 days have passed. The system shop should be refreshed, right? With this thought in mind, Liang Yue immediately switched the screen in front of him to the system shop interface. It was still the familiar Chinese-style shop and simple counter layout. Every time this guy calls out this shop interface, he can taste a vulgar Chinese web game flavor from it. Keg and manufacturing recipe. Placing a fruit or vegetable in a keg will eventually ferment into a barrel of beverage. This item comes from the Stardew Valley world, and the manufacturing recipe has been improved by the system's selling price. 500 points. 500? Could it be that this thing is better than the rabbit's foot? That's an item that can resist and accelerate. It only sells for 300. Looking at the inconspicuous keg on the virtual counter in front of him, and the piece of paper placed on the keg, Liang Yue immediately curled his lips and complained to the system. However, after this guy calmed down, he slowly began to think about the deeper meaning. First of all, the system will definitely not lie. Although the keg in front of him looks ordinary, it is still a creation from the game world. Putting any kind of vegetable and fruit in it can ferment into wine and beverages. Such an ability in itself is a heaven-defying attribute. So, since the system has marked a selling price of a full 500 points, then this item should definitely be worth the money, right? And the value of a thing cannot only focus on the present. Some ordinary ale and fruit wine are fine, but in the future, maybe I can use these kegs to brew spirit wine or something. Thinking this way, Liang Yue's heart immediately became much lighter, and his gaze towards the keg began to become more and more pleasing. But it, with a bite of his teeth, the 3,300 points in his wallet instantly became 2,008. Liang Yue's storage space immediately appeared with a brown keg and the manufacturing recipe. With a thought, The piece of paper recording the recipe immediately appeared in his hand. Yo-ho! This system is really fashionable enough, it can even draw pictures. Looking at the thing in his hand, Liang Yue immediately smiled, the corners of his mouth unconsciously curved. I saw that on this piece of paper at this time, there were neatly drawn 36 small squares, presenting a neat square arrangement. Just this layout. Liang Yue almost didn't need to think to know that this was the 36 grid toolbox he had newly upgraded, and within these dense space grids, 8 brown oak wood blocks were arranged in a shape at this moment, and in the middle of this wood, there were 2 iron ingots placed in it. This is the complete manufacturing recipe that is said to have been transformed by the system, if Liang Yue remembers correctly. The original recipe for this keg from the Stardew Valley world should require wood, copper ingots, iron ingots, and something like tree sap to make. In an earlier version, even clay was needed. Now that the system has changed it so much, it has completely integrated into the MIC rules, which also facilitates Liang Yue's mass production. I remember a few days ago, the hops and the base seemed to have matured, but because I lacked brewing tools in my hand, I didn't pick them temporarily. Now it's all alive. I'll try it when I get home. And how do I remember that in the proper game, as long as you put hops in a keg, it seems that it only takes a whole day to turn into ale. Right, I don't know if this kind of keg still has the previous efficiency after being transformed by the system. Chapter 65 Mrs. Gao. Around a little after 12 noon, Liang Yue finally broke free from the traffic jam and arrived at his destination, New York's Chinatown. With a pained expression, he filled up his gas tank at a gas station, parked in a paid parking lot, and then quickly found a restaurant facing the street to sit down. He ordered a bunch of so-called improved Chinese dishes and sat by the window, eating them without much enthusiasm while filling his stomach. Liang Yue also occasionally cast observation skills on the pedestrians passing by on the street. Of course, since he was out and about in an unfamiliar place, he couldn't recklessly spam his skills like he did in his own MIC world at the moment. Liang Yue could only use the observation skill in a limited and restrained manner, focusing on those who were more conspicuous and attracted his attention, and most of them, of course, were beautiful women. Li Wen, a third-generation Chinese immigrant, her ancestors were from Nanping, Fujian. She is currently 32 years old, divorced, and has a son and a daughter. She has a good figure, boasting the legendary 32F, and is currently being pursued by several men. Sun Yali, a second-generation immigrant, her ancestral home is Chaozhou, Guangdong. She is currently 23 years old, cheerful and outgoing, known for her dancing skills, and a frequent bar-goer. A year after graduating from college, she hasn't found a job and is currently running her family's used appliance store with her parents. Zhuang Xian, a Chinese student from Hong Kong, currently 21 years old, studying in the Chinese Department of New York University. She is a well-known campus belle and is currently living with her foreign boyfriend off campus, seeking American citizenship. Wu Xia, a second-generation immigrant, her ancestral home is Weihai, Shandong, currently just like that. In the time it took to eat a meal, Liang Yue sat by the window and threw out more than a dozen observation skills at the crowd. Besides sneakily peeking into other people's privacy from inside the restaurant, he also gained some rewards. At the very least, his skill proficiency increased by 50 or 60 points. I can't cast it anymore. Although the observation skill is useful, casting it too much is unbearable. I have to quickly find a way to get some energy, even if it's not from cultivation. Rubbing his temples, which were already feeling a little numb, Liang Yue decided to stop for the time being. Although he was a little unwilling, he still had serious business to attend to later. That old woman seems a little different. Just as he picked up a slice of cold beef salad with his chopsticks, ready to take a bite, Liang Yue suddenly saw the figure of an old woman on the street outside the window. As his gaze wandered, she was an elderly woman who looked leisurely and calm, with gray hair, a kind face, simple clothes, a slightly thin figure, and a bit of a hunch. At this moment, she was walking slowly through the crowd with a cane on. This seemingly ordinary old lady next door, Liang Yue saw an extremely unusual side of her. This was not a conjecture he made out of thin air in his mind, but a subtle sense honed by his own energy attribute, far exceeding ordinary people, and triggered by a long period of hunting. At this moment, on this seemingly kind old woman, Liang Yue clearly felt a trace of overflowing baleful aura and a faint warning of danger. Looking at this old woman, involuntarily, the hairs on the back of his neck began to stand up, and the muscles all over his body slowly tensed. This was the human body's own feedback to dangerous things, and it was also an instinctive reaction that Liang Yue had gained after slaughtering more than 100,000 zombies in the apocalypse world. Who is this expert? Looking at the old woman who is gradually walking away, Liang Yue didn't hesitate at this moment with a thought. He threw an observation skill over. No wonder, it turns out to be this old woman. After all, she's an old fox who has lived for more than 400 years. I just happened to run into her. It's better to leave each other alone. Liang Yue was also quite rational about his own positioning at this time. Anyway, from the surface, he was at most an exchange student with a bit of talent who liked to practice swords. As for the so-called underground drug production base and the forces of the underworld, even the legitimate American heroes and the American government don't care, so of course, he has no reason to come over and be a busybody anyway. When the time comes, this old woman will disappear on her own. Besides, I'm just starting out now, so it's better to keep a low profile. Oh ho. The observation skills proficiency has actually increased by 50 points. She truly is a named villain in the plot. After finishing his meal, Liang Yue officially started wandering around Chinatown. The neighborhood in front of him was like a large market in a Chinese county town. Except for being slightly larger in scale, it was just like being back in China. There were all kinds of dazzling goods, and the streets seemed a bit messy. Seafood stalls, restaurants, grocery stores, daily necessities, oil, salt, sauce, vinegar, tea shops, Chinese medicine halls, and even martial arts gyms. There was almost everything along the way. Liang Yue had been looking at everything with interest except for buying a dozen kinds of fruits at a fruit stall on the street, only buying 2 or 3 of each, which made the old man running the stall want to beat him up. He had almost no decent gains. Finally, after wandering around for more than 20 minutes, he finally found his organization in a large Chinese supermarket in a community. Okra, wasabi, avocado, water chestnut, kale, cauliflower. What is this? Wax apple, seems to be a tropical fruit. I'll take 2 to try. Lettuce, spinach, chives. No chives. Roots, no. Strawberries, pineapples, dragon fruit, peaches, grapes. What is this? Jaboticaba? This thing seems to be produced in Taiwan. I'll try half a kilogram. Cherries, blueberries, kiwis, sweet corn. It seems like they sell seeds over there. Let's go take a look. Vegetables, chives. They sell chives here. Black beans, red beans, soybeans, peas, tomatoes. This variety seems a little different. Looks like a small gourd. I'll take it back and try planting it. Found it. Medicinal material seeds. Ginseng, wolfberry, polygonidum, gastrodia. Chapter 66. A barrel of fruit wine. As evening approached, Liang Yue finally returned home. He drove his brand new Hummer, loaded with nearly 200 kinds of goods, consisting of various vegetables, fruits, medicinal herbs, flowers, and potted seedlings, returning fully loaded afterward. Even with the secret assistance of a storage space, the fellow still had to run back and forth between the house and the car 3 or 4 times before he could barely move all the goods in the carriage into the room. This hall is not small, but I've pretty much emptied that area of Chinatown. It seems I really have to go to the suburbs more often in the future, or I need to have special channels, like relationships with plant nurseries. However, as an ordinary high school student, and an exchange student from China, guarding such a small place at home, if I buy too many things back at once, it will definitely arouse suspicion, especially when the neighbor next door is a shield agent. So, the next step is to go out as much as possible, try to digest all the things outside before coming back. So my goal for tomorrow should be the New York Botanical Garden. After watching TV and surfing the internet in the living room for a while, eating the fruits he bought from the Chinese supermarket today, Liang Yue gradually sent today's harvest into the stronghold world. After nightfall, under the special rules of the McWorld, planting various plants is quite simple and crude. In addition to ready-made seeds and plant seedlings that can be directly planted in the ground, those finished fruits and vegetables that Liang Yue bought today are also effortless to operate. For example, a mature pomelo, after putting it into the character interfaces built into a bar, will automatically generate 4 seeds with extremely high survival rates under the same operating mode. For example, small grained fruits such as cherries and grapes, after putting a bunch into the toolbar, can also generate 4 seeds each planted in plowed soil. It can almost guarantee 100% survival, although the whole process seems a bit absurd. This is the rule in the McWorld, simple and crude. You have to accept it, of course. After having these plant seeds and seedlings, it doesn't mean that you can plant them randomly everywhere. Liang Yue still needs to carry out more scientific planning himself in the current McWorld. Although there is no so-called seasonal change, various climate terrains will also be generated according to the different altitudes of various regions. Temperate deciduous forests, tropical rainforests, swamps, deserts, grasslands. snow mountains, caves, etc., are all available. Tropical fruits such as wax apples, tree grapes, and mangoes are obviously not suitable for planting in the base surrounded by mountains in front of you. Similarly, plants such as coffee, snow lotus, and ginseng may be a better choice to plant in forests with slightly higher altitudes. In addition, Liang Yue's trip to Chinatown also unexpectedly purchased a batch of plant seedlings, such as small leaf red sandalwood, Hainan rosewood, Phoebe's henan, and even yew, etc., from a bonsai store that seemed to be deceiving tourists. Under the banner of precious species, he naturally knew what the store was thinking when they took out such mass producible seedlings and sold them by the plant. Many unsuspecting people who came from China and traveled to Chinatown were probably the main target customer group in such stores. Those plants with a little styling are priced very high, but after buying them, in addition to being cheated of money, whether they can pass customs smoothly is still unknown. But for Liang Yue, the existence of these people saved him a lot of effort anyway. He himself doesn't care much about the appearance and styling of those species, as long as the seedlings sold are strong and free of pests. In this way, knowing the surrounding terrain, Liang Yue still spent most of the day classifying and planting this batch of plants in their respective suitable places. After a hasty lunch, with a hint of the joy of a farmer expecting a harvest in his heart, this fellow immediately devoted himself to the creation of the magical creation of the wine barrel. For this reason, he also specially carved out several spacious private wine cellars under a tall mountain on one side of the basin. 8 oak blocks, plus 2 iron ingots. Liang Yue was in it at this time, and he suddenly felt a sense of accomplishment. Then, I saw this fellow wave his sleeve, and a palm-sized green pine cone shaped flower suddenly appeared in his palm. This thing is nothing else, it is the hops that he planted in the field before, and it is also a magical species from the Stardew Valley game world. Don't underestimate this small hop. The entire plant in the outside plantation can only pick this one. Moreover, the quantifier 1 may not be appropriate for this thing. It may be more accurate to call it a serving. However, whether it's 1 or a serving, now I just want to know whether such a full and slightly overripe hop can brew a barrel of ale like in the game. With this thought in mind, Liang Yue couldn't help but widen his eyes at this time, and then pressed the hop in his hand onto the wine barrel in front of him. Suddenly, something magical happened. I saw that the oak wine barrel, which was originally seamless and had no gaps, immediately seemed to have grown an invisible mouth, and absorbed the palm-sized hop. A few seconds later, a faint fermentation aura began to seep out from the wine barrel, slowly overflowing into the surrounding air. After a while, the inside of the wine barrel even began to make gurgling sounds so amazing. Liang Yue twitched the corner of his mouth at this time, with an inexplicable look of emotion, and unconsciously began to circle around the fermenting wine barrel, constantly doing research. After a long while, he stopped in vain. With a flip of his palm, another hop appeared in his palm. And then this fellow filled the remaining 9 servings into the wine barrels one by one. I don't know if those crops that are not produced in Stardew Valley can also be played like this. Theoretically it should be possible, right? After all, this is a wine barrel that has been transformed by the system. So, the greedy Liang Yue held this idea, and very secretly turned out a bunch of grapes from his storage space, and then selected an empty wine barrel next to him and pressed it on it. This does feel like it's been absorbed, but compared to the previous wine barrels, why doesn't this one ferment? System, what's going on? Unable to figure it out, this fellow could only ask the system for help again. Ding. The hops produced in the Stardew Valley world contain the essence of the species. One is a comprehensive complex of hundreds of hops. The grapes used by the host are just grape varieties from the real world. Its own quality is not enough to reach the level of fermenting the wine barrel, and it needs to be compensated by quantity. So that's it. Liang Yue suddenly looked enlightened when he heard the words, and after figuring out the working principle of the wine barrel, he finally felt a lot more at ease in his heart. But I don't have that many grapes on me now. Based on the idea of not being able to give up halfway, Liang Yue then simply summoned the entire storage space. Scanning his vision, he saw that in the space grid at this moment, there were sparsely stored batches of fruits with different varieties and small quantities. This was a batch of excess scraps left over after he made various fruits he bought into seeds, including apples, peaches, strawberries, cantaloupe, and so on. After a long while, Liang Yue suddenly had an unreliable idea in his mind. Why don't I just put them together and brew a barrel of mixed fruit wine? Let's do it. It's a waste to keep them anyway. Chapter 67. Stark, who practices both magic and martial arts? On Monday, Liang Yue, as usual, took the school bus to school, carrying a notebook in his arms in addition to his school bag and lunchbox. After greeting Holland, Sam, and his cute Japanese deskmate behind him, he began to write his novel on his own. However, because he was in the classroom at this time, Liang Yue naturally couldn't go all out and code frantically. Even with some restraint, his writing speed was still very fast in the eyes of others in recent days. Several familiar classmates around him, and even the entire international class, seemed to know that he was writing a novel. They were all talking about it. Some cheered him on, like Peter and Sam behind him. Some were probably digging at him and mocking him in secret, thinking that he was overestimating himself. As for who exactly, Liang Yue was not interested in knowing, because apart from the few classmates around him, he had no intention of paying attention to others. However, Liang Yue himself understood a little about what these people were thinking. It was nothing more than envy, jealousy, and hatred. Think about it. Liang Yue is an all-around student. He has been ahead of everyone in several quizzes, and his academic performance is among the best. His combat power is off the charts. The cafeteria incident is still vivid in his mind. He is popular with girls. Elizabeth, this blonde girl, often comes to him to play, and the key is that he is also handsome. He is simply the legendary someone else's child. Unanimously, Liang Yue almost became the potential public enemy of all the other male students in the entire class. Of course, in comparison, the female students in the class were much kinder to him. For example, Yamamoto Neko, the shy island girl who often played Liang Yue's desk mate, had been talking to him in a low voice during this period, and she also liked to secretly watch him write novels when she had nothing to do. Wanger Stacy, the class's popular lover, would also often chat with him when discussing biology problems with his former classmate Peter. Because of this, Holland behind him was very jealous. How is it, buddy? Didn't you write a lot of manuscripts before? With the quality of your novel, it shouldn't be difficult to find a publisher, right? Peter was lying on his desk at the moment, looking at Liang Yue, who was typing on the keyboard unhurriedly, and asked. Sam next to him was also rarely quiet at this time, his eyes fixed on his computer screen from the side, his face full of melancholy, and he seemed to be deeply immersed in the plot. I have entrusted the publication to a relative. She runs a hospital in New York and should have a lot of contacts in this area, Liang Yue said without turning his head, his hands never leaving the keyboard. Wow. Doesn't that mean that you will be able to see your novel in the bookstore soon? At this time, Sam finally recovered from his daze, and the look in his eyes towards someone even carried a bit of admiration. Obviously, as a high school student whose academic performance is neither high nor low and whose hobbies are not very successful, he should be very envious of some so-called successful people in his heart. For example, the captain of the football team, the elite in the baseball team, etc. Because their existence seems to have always been the focus of the entire campus and student discussions, especially admired by the girls in the school. However, he estimated that this was the first time he had seen a hot figure like Liang Yue who could write novels and was about to be published. You are amazing, buddy. But as your loyal reader, I think I need to give you some advice. Similarly, Holland was no better than Sam. Although he was also a very talented biology genius, his academic performance was among the best, and he would directly transform into a superhero who was about to carry the banner of Marvel. But this young man's family conditions were not very good. He had been living in his uncle and aunt's house since he was a child, and he was never well off. He was also very envious of people like Liang Yue who could earn money with his own ability. I also have some opinions to give you, Liang. Frankly speaking, although your novel is really good, you are simply not cherishing the characters in the novel enough. Yes, buddy. You can't just kill off the character I like. This feeling is just too bad. Yeah, I am so optimistic about Big Wolf. He is so powerful. At a young age, he can lead the Wolf Clan's army to beat the old lion to lose his armor and run away in embarrassment, and he also captured the little lion as a result. You killed him off in a bloody wedding. Killed him off. This is just too unfair. You better change it. Not only Big Wolf, but most of the people in the Stark family in the north have been killed off by you, buddy. Except for those two girls, it seems that there's only one bastard left. Let Liang Yue change the plot now. First, it was too troublesome, and second, he didn't have the intention to do so, so he could only follow the plot of the original work and say to Peter and Sam behind him, this little girl, Arya, has loved to dance with knives and swords since she was a child, and her personality is relatively independent, so after escaping from King's Landing, she will embark on a path of revenge alone. That must be very difficult, right? Yes, very difficult, and you must arrange some adventures and opportunities for her, just like the martial arts in your Eastern world, where you can find secret books by jumping off a cliff. Yes, Liang. Isn't there magic on that continent? How about letting Arya become a magician? Give Arya a dragon. I think it would be better to let the little girl become a dragon knight. Dual cultivation of magic and martial arts. Good idea. Yes. This idea is just great. Amidst the endless chatter of the two fools behind him, the morning's classes quickly ended. Liang Yue did not try to challenge the patience of the teachers, so he listened attentively in class, and only wrote novels during class breaks or self-study classes. But even so, in just one morning, this guy still coded at least 50 to 60,000 words with his update speed. Even Holland and Sam behind him, the two irresponsible book fans who kept urging him to change the plot, were hooked on the sidelines, just short of having a bucket of popcorn in their hands. Elizabeth Stuart, 17-year-old noble daughter of the King of England, a branch of the royal family, whose bloodline can be traced back to James I. So she is known as Elizabeth James in the school. She is free, intelligent, and has an amazing learning ability. She is deeply loved by the royal elders. It is rumored that she seems to have some unknown talent. The certain phase fluctuation in her body seems to be similar to the host. Chapter 68 Mission halfway completed. Lunchtime in the cafeteria. Almost the instant Liang Yue saw Elizabeth, he unhesitatingly cast an observation skill on her. Again, to be honest, he was very curious about this girl's background and personal information, including, even more so, her motives for approaching him. As expected, the level 2 observation skill was indeed stronger than the level 1 version, but the extent of the enhancement made him scratch his head. Vague, barely discernible, yet it did indeed reveal something. This girl's body has some kind of compatibility fluctuation similar to mine. When he asked the system, that guy once again played dead, completely ignoring him. What's wrong? You've seemed a bit distracted since the cafeteria earlier. Did something happen? At this time, Elizabeth was lying on a sponge mat, flipping through the notebook Liang Yue had brought. The soft cotton clothing, aided by gravity, perfectly outlined the girl's alluring back curves. Most of this girl's energy was focused on his novel. Occasionally, when he wasn't paying attention, she would secretly rummage through some private secrets on his hard drive. Ever since Liang Yue defeated this golden-haired beauty, who was a year older than him, with his absolute physical advantage last week, this girl seemed to have lost interest in continuing combat practice with him. However, this didn't seem to affect Elizabeth's relationship with him, and Liang Yue vaguely had the illusion that this girl seemed to have transferred her interest in fighting to him. Nothing happened. It's just that don't quite understand. Liang Yue's self-talk at this time did not seem to be noticed by this girl, who was still fiddling with his computer on her own. After a while, she found a bunch of photos from a hidden folder room, a bunch of photos about plants. Wow, this flower is so beautiful. Where did you take it? New York Botanical Garden. I went there to visit yesterday and took some photos back as souvenirs. These photos taken by Liang Yue were really just a side trip. This guy's original plan was naturally to go to that publicly accessible garden with abundant species resources to find some plants that would be more useful to him. Secretly, he had prepared 3 pairs of small scissors for cutting seedlings. However, in order to cover up his despicable behavior, this guy also brought a digital camera with him and took a bunch of so-called souvenir photos. According to the description on the Botanical Gardens brochure, the garden covers more than 800 hectares and has as many as 15,000 species of living plants inside some of the pavilions. There are more than 5 million precious plant specimens from all over the world. The richness of species resources in the garden is absolutely perfect for visitors like him who are visiting with a purpose. In just one day yesterday, Liang Yue only walked less than a third of the area of this botanical garden. After picking and choosing, he had secretly collected more than 400 copies of various plant seeds, cuttings, seedlings, fruits, etc. In order to transfer these species to his stronghold world in time, this guy ran to the toilet a full 8 times. Thus, stronghold world upgrade mission, species diversity, plant chapter, current completion. 687 1000. Unknowingly, the mission data had already passed halfway. However, since this upgrade mission did not have a so-called time limit and the urgency was not very strong, Liang Yue decided to take a day off next weekend and go to the botanical garden again. At that time, he would try to complete this task in one go. Speaking of which, since there is a plant chapter in this species diversity mission, the next stage should be collecting animals, right? Regarding this aspect, I have to plan it carefully and try to build a complete ecosystem and make the reward for the plant chapter seems to be called land and ocean. If I guessed correctly, the reward for this stage should be to divide the stronghold world into 2 ecosystems, land and sea. The original Mick world doesn't seem to have a distinction between lakes and oceans, but the difference between saltwater and freshwater is quite big. In this way, shouldn't I also focus on collecting some aquatic plants, at least some algae, aquatic plants, etc. Pa. Just as Liang Yue was sitting there, unconsciously starting to stare blankly, Elizabeth next to him suddenly slapped his thigh hard. Then she looked at him with a dissatisfied expression. "You're daydreaming again." Seeing this, Liang Yue quickly apologized, and then laid down next to this girl, explaining the plants in the photos to her. Time flies. And 2 more days have passed in a blink of an eye. In these 2 days, Liang Yue finally completed his great book copying plan, and completely reproduced the first 6 novels of Ice and Fire, A Song of Ice and Fire in this American comic world. And according to the idea of a hacker-leaked version of the script in his previous life, he barely made the plot of the 7th part round out. Not to say that it completely implements the author's intention, but in Liang Yue's view, it is at least more reasonable and complete than the ending plot of the TV series version. However, compared with a happy ending of the TV series version, the 7th part of the novel he completed himself ends in tragedy. Although the Allied forces of humanity barely drove away the White Walker army in the final stage, they did not completely eliminate the hidden dangers of the White Walkers. The various families within the kingdom suffered heavy losses in this war between humans and ghosts, but after temporarily bidding farewell to the threat of the White Walkers, a new game of power struggle is brewing again. A foreseeable troubled world and cycle of disaster seems to be about to begin. This also coincides with the 7th novel name that the original author had already named, A Dream of Spring. On this day in the afternoon, after school, Aunt Liu drove to the school from her busy schedule, and then took him and the remaining 4 novels' electronic manuscripts to a publishing house that was said to be very powerful in the entire industry, and completed the signing of the novel. The 2 parties agreed that the first part of this Ice and Fire, A Song of Ice and Fire, would be officially on sale in major bookstores across the United States in about a week. The specific matters will depend on sales, and the publishing house will also have someone to plan and arrange for the remaining 6 novels to be put on sale one after another. It has to be said that even in the United States, the importance of contacts and resources is enough to affect the overall situation of a matter. Originally, an ordinary high school student like Liang Yue, who is unknown in this country, really wrote a novel, even if it was still a masterpiece of the quality of Ice and Fire. A Song of Ice and Fire. If Aunt Liu hadn't been helping him by the side, and he rashly approached the publishing house, it is estimated that people wouldn't even bother with him even if he was lucky enough to encounter a discerning review editor in the end, who could recommend him to successfully publish. He would definitely not have the current treatment of unified sales in the entire United States. Regarding this, whether in his previous life or this life, domestically or abroad, Liang Yue himself has a clear understanding in his heart. If you receive someone else's favor, you have to find an opportunity to repay it, even if it is for this kind of care from elders. Even if the current Liang Yue can't help Aunt Liu with anything, he will keep this matter firmly in his heart and slowly repay it in the future. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69: Solar Energy. Sunflower. Originating from the Plants vs. Zombies world, it can automatically collect solar energy after maturing. The selling price is 200 points. After 3 days, the items in the system store were refreshed again. If solar energy can be used to exchange for various plants in the Plants vs. Zombies world, then what is this energy here with me? Solar energy? Or can it be used to do something else? Forget it, the selling price is only 200 anyway. I'll buy one to see. It won't hurt even if it's useless. Hey, right, system, in that game, people can collect solar energy with a click of the mouse. How do I store it here? Looking at the sunflower on the mall counter, with a big smiling face and a cute appearance, Liang Yue couldn't help but feel a sense of affection. But before buying, it's better to ask about necessary things firsting. The system can store it for you. That's good. Clicking to buy, the original 2,800 points in the wallet were immediately deducted by 200, and a round, cute plant was instantly added to his storage space. This sunflower is about 1 meter tall, and the flower head alone accounts for most of the plant's volume. The stem is short and thick, and there are 4 large leaves below. The overall image looks almost exactly like in the game. After Liang Yue took it out, it began to sway left and right in his palm, looking like it was dancing. Very rhythmic. He casually planted this little thing in the soil outside the door. Under the sunlight, the smiling face on the sunflower seemed to become even brighter. Liang Yue was sitting on the wooden steps next to him, watching this magical plant with a silly smile on his face, gently stroking it a few times with his palm from time to time. In just a moment, a ball of light, shimmering with a soft glow, slowly fell from the sky. Then, Under his gaze, it slowly landed on the grass in front of the sunflower, and disappeared the moment it landed. It seems that it has been stored by the system. At the same time, in the upper left corner of Liang Yu's vision, a sun icon quietly appeared, with a number 50 behind the icon, and then slowly hid again in an instant. A connection was established between him and this energy. Liang Yu could clearly sense the existence of this thing in a certain position beside him, invisible and intangible, but it does exist there. This feeling is very subtle. With a thought, the sunlight energy that was originally collected by the system suddenly appeared in his hand, light as nothing, and without any specific form, but the feeling it gave Liang Yu was very warm. He held it in front of his eyes and stared at this ball of sunlight energy for a long time. He could faintly feel a trace of uprightness and greatness in it. System, is this thing useful? Ling. Please explore on your own. Host. Liang Yu had already expected the feedback from the system, which was like a routine. However, this could not stop his curiosity about this mysterious energy. After all, his feelings could not be faked. Liang Yu could almost foresee that this energy, captured from the sky by the magical sunflower in front of him, would definitely be useful to him. It's just that, limited by Liang Yu's current vision and knowledge, he can't determine what it can do specifically. Ling. After testing, the Outpost World Upgrade Task Species Diversity, Plant Chapter, has now met the completion requirements. Host, would you like to receive the task reward immediately? Another 4 days passed. At this time, Liang Yu was in a birch forest in the McWorld, taking a batch of new species he had collected from the botanical garden during the day for field planting. Before he had paid much attention to the task data, he didn't expect that he had already met the requirements of the task. At this time, Liang Yu looked at a seed called a more cork tree in his hand, and then checked the remaining few dozen seedlings in the storage space. So he continued to work hard. After about half an hour, Liang Yu finally planted all the inventory in the space. At this time, he himself had unknowingly arrived at the top of a mountain. In front of him was a boundless sea of birch forests, with a faint mist lingering in it. A wide river meandered from the other side of the mountain, passing through the forest in front of him, and slowly disappearing at the end of his sight, echoing with a round of setting sun. It was like a beautiful picture scroll, making people unconsciously immerse themselves in it. Speaking of which, since the end of the previous novice trial, Liang Yu had hardly explored this McWorld again. Although, in terms of the area he has explored so far, it is enough for him to develop and display his abilities. Sitting idle and guarding the treasure mountain without entering is obviously not a good state. Therefore, at this time, Liang Yu made the plan to set off again after being temporarily free. Of course, he is completely different now from when he first arrived, not to mention that his physical fitness has now completely exceeded the limits of ordinary people, and there is also his well-tested and skilled marksmanship, or, he can already skillfully apply all the character functions under the Mech rules. At the very least, Liang Yu now has a map in his hand, and Mech map that has only explored less than 1/10 of the areas for the map of the game world. The character positioning function is one of the basic functions, which is much easier to use than external GPS satellite navigation. Permanent positioning of the map origin, real-time update of map content. Unexplored areas are gray, and the known areas are almost completely risk-free and lifelike. Liang Yu can even find the exact location of his base in the mountains, as well as the plantation, ranch, lake, and even the residence inside the base, absolutely essential for home travel. I just don't know if it can be used in other worlds. System, I want to receive the task reward. Boom. The moment Liang Yu's voice fell, a muffled sound suddenly burst out from above his head. Immediately, this guy was so frightened that he shivered, almost making him roll off the stone on the top of the mountain. After stabilizing himself, he hurriedly looked up and saw that at this time, above the blue sky, a pale golden light was presenting a shock-wave shape, centered on the position above his head, and constantly spreading outward. It turned into a bright halo, covering the entire sky in the blink of an eye. For a time, the clouds steamed and the rosy colors crisscrossed, which was magnificent and unusual. It was as if the golden light was undergoing a wonderful chemical reaction with something mysterious and magnificent, and instantly evolved into hundreds of colors. It's just that this thing came quickly and went quickly. Liang Yu was sitting on the top of the mountain at this time, staring blankly at the scene, his face full of curiosity and shock. It's just that before he had time to immerse himself in it, the dazzling colored light began to quickly dissolve and quickly hide, until it completely disappeared. The whole process only lasted a few seconds. Is that it? It looks almost like setting off a large firework. Chapter 70 Giant Syringe. Since recovering from the halo that bloomed that day, Liang Yu, with his keen perception, immediately noticed some subtle differences. This difference seemed to originate from the greater environment of this world, and also from a certain special rhythm within his own body. With Liang Yu's current level and understanding, he naturally couldn't explain the profound meaning behind this, but he could vaguely sense a change through his own feelings. That was, this world and its nature seemed to have become more intimate with him. System, please explain the specifics of this reward's effects. Unable to understand the specifics, Liang Yue naturally threw the question to the system, and this time the system didn't brush him off. As the host previously guessed, the upgraded base world has formed a division between ocean and land, and the boundary between fresh water and salt water will gradually become clear. In addition, the connection between the upgraded base world and the host will be closer, which will facilitate the host's more convenient use of the base world's rules and abilities. For example, to what extent can I now apply the rules of this MIC world? Liang Yue licked his lips subconsciously upon hearing this and immediately asked the host can briefly establish small spatial channels between reality and the base world in order to achieve the purpose of resource transfer. At the same time, the host can also use this ability to a limited extent in the various worlds to mobilize and use the resources within the base world. The specific functions and differences, please explore by the hosting. The second stage base world upgrade mission Species Diversity, Animal Edition, has now been issued. Please check it in time. Hearing what the system said, Liang Yue nodded with a look of understanding. It really is animals. Open the mission panel. Mission name, Species Diversity, Animal Edition. Mission requirements, collect more than 500 kinds of animal families or groups, introduce them into the MIC world, and ensure that the species can reproduce and thrive normally. Mission rewards, 1 extra draw chance, a small surprise from the ecological circle's micro end. This mission is really interlocking. After reading the new content of the mission interface, a strange smile appeared on Liang Yue's face. He looked up at the sun setting on the horizon. Immediately, he flipped his sleeve and took out an iron pickaxe from the storage space, and began a simple transformation project on the stone cliff of this mountain peak. Regarding the animal chapter of the character, the first thing to clarify is that Liang Yue's storage space, obtained under the MIC rules, has the same function as most protagonists' storage spaces. The internal time and space are still food and alike. Whatever it looks like when you put it in, it will look like when you take it out. As for living species, it is limited to the seeds and seedlings of various plants. 2 large plant individuals, such as an entire tree, cannot be placed in a single space grid. As for animals, the corpses of small species may be possible, but living ones are definitely not. This also determines that Liang Yue, in completing the upgrade task of the plant chapter, before he has the ability to open a small space channel, it is impossible to introduce any animals into the MIC world. So the current problem is that in the real world, I can introduce various animals into MIC through the space channel. But to other heavens and worlds, whether I can open the space channel again, or use other methods to collect various animals, is an unknown. If not, this second task will be troublesome. After all, during the previous plant chapter, Liang Yue could still buy a bunch of fruits and vegetables from the supermarket under the pretext of personal hobbies or daily consumption. When he got to the botanical garden, he could also scavenge various plant seeds and seedlings without anyone noticing. But if it comes to animals, Liang Yue certainly couldn't buy more than 500 kinds of breeding species groups to take home, let alone run directly to the zoo to steal those ornamental animals. Otherwise, let alone Carlson, a professional agent working for S.H.I.E.L.D., even the other neighbors around Liang Yue's house would suspect this guy's purpose. But if the objects collected are fish, or crabs, shellfish, there is still some room for operation. Stepping out of the circular space channel, with a gentle wave of his hand, the channel shrunk by itself until it completely disappeared. The whole process took about 5 seconds compared to the previous time when he entered and exited the MIC world. It was directly shortened by more than half. Moreover, even after the space channel disappeared, Liang Yue could still clearly feel the existence of his own base world while standing in the bedroom. That is to say, he no longer needs to indirectly communicate with the MIC world through the base token like before. Afterwards, Liang Yue didn't waste any time. He looked at the windows covered by thick curtains, but still felt a little uneasy, so he flipped his hand and took out an apple from the storage space, ate it, and came to the basement of his house, which had been enlarged several times. I can feel the base world now, but the location is too general, and I can't accurately locate it at all, not even the approximate direction. Does that mean that every time I open the space channel, it can only be located at the place where I left before? Inconvenient, too inconvenient. Is this the Mixed Law affinity? Not enough? But didn't the system also say before that I can already mobilize and use the resources of the base world to a limited extent? Could it be that there are some important conditions that I have overlooked? Tisk. Why can't that guy from the system just explain the upgraded abilities to me clearly, and I have to find it myself? If there was such a thing that could help me locate the base world, that would be great, even if the location is not so accurate, even if I can't go there myself, as long as the scavenged animals can be roughly sent to the terrain where they are suitable for survival. Squatting on the sofa in the basement, Liang Yue, who was originally scratching his scalp hard, suddenly thought of something. And a gleam of light suddenly appeared in his eyes. He quickly flipped his sleeve and took out a thick paper item from the storage space. This is the map that he had held in his hand and played with in the base world before. Exquisite glass syringe, from the world of Attack on Titan. It is said that it can be used to extract and inject the spinal fluid of giants, and indirectly have the ability to transform into giants. The price is 100 points. Chapter 71. It in Chapter X27, S Fate. After some experimentation, Liang Yue's guess was finally verified. The result also made him very satisfied. With the assistance of the map, he could spend a certain amount of time locating almost all the places that had been explored. Then, through his connection with the stronghold world, he could send the items that needed to be introduced into the designated area. During the process, Liang Yue didn't even need to open the space channel to complete this operation. The principle behind it was roughly the same as him taking items from his own storage space. For Liang Yue, the existence of the stronghold world was actually a super large private space plane. It's just that compared to the storage space that comes with a mid-game character, his connection with the stronghold world is not so close. And Liang Yue's current ability is far from being strong enough to forcibly control a world with the help of the system and the further integration of the world rules. He can barely complete this transcendent function operation, but even so, Liang Yue is still very unfamiliar with the application of this stronghold world function and cannot achieve perfection. For example, when he used the map to send half of the big apple he had just eaten to the pasture area of the mountain base to feed a certain cow, the final location of this half apple is likely to be far from his wishes. It is already quite a good performance to be able to control this error within 20 meters. In addition, Liang Yue could not put the items that needed to be introduced into the coverage. For example, at this time, he could not put the apple in his hand into the house with the doors and windows closed, and he had no ability to put any items through the thick oil and stone structure into the basement below the base. The reason for all this is inseparable from the fact that the map in his hand only has a plan view display. However, the benefit of this is also very obvious. That is, Liang Yue hardly has to worry that the items or species he puts into the stronghold world in this way will directly appear in mid-air or under the soil. However, in order to make up for the lack of control accuracy, this guy came up with a crooked idea, that is to remake a map with a small display range but high accuracy, so as to improve the accuracy of item placement at the auxiliary level. The next day, a brand new week arrived as scheduled. After a period of adaptation, Liang Yue's high school life has gradually improved. The novel in hand has also been written, and he has no burden for the time being. He has finally entered the good student mode in the classroom as in the past. In the afternoon, this guy will practice double sword flow target shooting in the swordsmanship club as usual, and then be called into a separate practice room by Elizabeth. The two of them are greasy and crooked together, rubbing and hugging, as intimate as if they were already living together outside. However, both Liang Yue and this blonde girl know there seems to be an invisible barrier between the two, and the reason why the current situation is formed is only because they have their own purposes. To be precise, the person who holds a certain purpose is mainly Elizabeth, and he is just cooperating considering that this little girl is a beauty. Liang Yue is also happy to earn the other party's advantage without any loss, but then again, since this noble British royal girl, who is of noble origin, is willing to risk being taken advantage of by him, and even running the risk of accidental fire, is unwilling to give up, that can only mean that the benefits that this blonde girl is trying to get from herself seem to be even greater. Finally, on a certain day 2 weeks later, Liang Yue's guess was finally verified. Elizabeth Stuart, a 17-year-old British royal girl, a branch of the royal family, now goes by the pseudonym Elizabeth James. Her bloodline can be traced back to James I. She has been intelligent and has an amazing learning ability since she was a child, and is deeply loved by the elders of the royal family. At the age of 10, she awakened the ability inherited from the bloodline of her ancestor, who once vigorously advocated the divine right of kings, and indirectly possessed the ability to copy the abilities of others. Later, on the advice of a certain witch, she came to the high school where she was studying. Currently, this noble girl has obtained the two abilities of vitals disappear and fullness blood return from the host through close contact. WTF. I rub. System, why didn't you remind me? Turning back and closing the door, Liang Yue directly gave the blonde beauty, who is looking at him with a smile on her face and a shy smile on her face, A bear hugged her in his arms, then he leaned against the wall and slowly sat down, gently stroking her smooth hair and the back of her head, forcibly enduring the urge to slap her down, and questioned the system in his hearting. The other party's copying ability is harmless to you. It is just simply imitating your transformation of Mook rules through a certain copy phase in her body with a limit value of the other party's ability. It can only copy up to 3 kinds of ability phases from the host. Give an example. For example, the immortal curse on Deadpool's body, or the abilities possessed by rule weapons such as the Time Stone. Doesn't that mean that this little girl's family's bloodline is very powerful? She can actually awaken the ability to copy rule abilities. It's just limited imitation and copying, and converting this type of rule ability into some kind of specific phase fluctuation. The limitation itself is very large, but it is convenient for research and learning. Who is it for? Liang Yue was stunned when he heard this, and then he shivered, and his mood became worse and worse. Surprise, anger, grievance. For a time, various complex emotions began to emerge in his heart, and it was difficult to calm down for a long time. I really underestimated this blonde girl. Not only can she copy other people's abilities, but she can also convert them into something concrete for people to research and learn. If it were in ancient times, this girl should be a witch, right? Thinking of this, Liang Yue pulled Elizabeth, who was humming a ballad while leaning on his shoulder, to his eyes, slowly inserted his hand into her hair, combed the golden hair on the girl's forehead to the back of her head, and then frowned at the other person. What's wrong? Did something happen? Looking at this guy's appearance, Elizabeth immediately stretched out a finger and gently rubbed it on Liang Yue's brow, seeming to want to smooth the wrinkles between his brows. I was thinking, didn't you say before that you would visit my house? Liang Yue pinched the other person's earlobe and said with aggression in his eyes. When the blonde girl heard this, she immediately thought of something, and then rolled her eyes, looking at him with some shyness on her face. I knew you weren't thinking about anything good. With our relationship, isn't it normal to not think about anything good? Chapter 72 New Plane. After getting back home from school, Liang Yue felt a bit lost on this day before heading to the next world. The observation skill at level 5 had indeed given him a big surprise. Although he had been somewhat prepared in his heart, when the surprise came, it still made him a little at a loss. Women, it turns out cheap stuff isn't so easy to earn. Liang Yue strength, 29 agility, 40 constitution, 28 energy, 50 bloodline, human, sealed, talents, vigorous spirit, affinity skills, language mastery, skipping bullet, condition not met, not activated, advanced gun mastery, basic swordsmanship, observation abilities, simple tool making, mech game character species diversity, animal addition, current collection count, 113,500. Just as Liang Yue had expected, in the real world, especially in a developed city like New York, quietly collecting over 500 species of animals without alarming anyone was not an easy task, especially since Liang Yue didn't want to settle for just any species for the sake of the task data. Accepting rats, lizards, and other vermin indiscriminately for 2 whole weeks, he ran around, visiting various docks and fresh food markets in New York City whenever he had time. Various marine species such as fish, shellfish, crabs, shrimp, octopuses, and starfish became the main targets for Liang Yue's task data collection. Over a period of time, he had almost established a marine ecosystem. Apart from that, a pair of genuine macaws purchased from a regular pet store were probably the only exceptions during this period. In short, Liang Yue's progress on the animal addition task was very slow, and fortunately, the system didn't set any time limit on this task, allowing him enough time to slack off and relax. Otherwise, he would probably have been driven to desperation. After returning home, Liang Yue made himself a sumptuous dinner as usual, watching the news on TV while eating leisurely. However, a little knot in his heart made this pre-departure meal taste bland. 2 abruptly towering stone peaks soared into the clouds, while below was a large stretch of giant stone plain between the hills, where the terrain undulated very little, roughly presenting a vacant area of 500 or 600 meters square all around. Liang Yue had already piled up a 2-meter-high stone wall, the wall tightly sealed without any entrances or exits. Inside the wall, torches, like streetlights, illuminated the surroundings with scattered points of light. Within this enclosure, piles of supplies were stacked on the ground at intervals, from various guns and ammunition to food and fruits, to stone and iron ingots, and various weapons and tools. A brand new small-scale map displayed everything in this entire area in order to be able to use the new functions of the base world more easily. Liang Yue was also quite dedicated, and at this time, He had almost done everything he could to the extreme. A setting sun was slowly setting in the distance, and the originally blue sky was gradually turning dark blue, with brilliant stars beginning to fill the firmament. In the center of the sky, a Milky Way stretched across from above the 9 heavens. Such a vast and magnificent starry sky, at a glance, would inevitably lead people to have infinite reverie. Liang Yue was naturally no exception. At this time, he was sitting on a sofa, quietly looking up at the starry sky. His originally somewhat irritable mood gradually calmed down. I don't know if this base world is a sphere or a whole universe. This starry sky is so brilliant, it doesn't seem like some kind of special effect. Ling. The second heavenly world experience time has arrived. Host, do you want to enter now? Midnight arrived as scheduled, and the system prompt also sounded at this time. Upon hearing this, Liang Yue stood up from the sofa almost without hesitation, lightly patting the armrest. Enter, Ling. Command confirmed, randomly selecting positioning coordinates. The plane the host will enter this time is the new legend of Shaolin World. Whoosh! In the instant the system prompt fell, Liang Yue's figure disappeared in place. Shortly after, a burst of dizziness and the changing of light and shadow. When he opened his eyes again, the scene in front of him was completely different. At the same time, a stream of information that did not originally belong to him quietly appeared in Liang Yue's mind. My identity in this world is actually a Taoist priest. How interesting. This was a small temple that was so dilapidated that it had almost nothing to recommend it. Half of the roof had collapsed, and the corners were covered in cobwebs. In the very center of the temple hall, a Buddha statue missing an arm was sitting there, covered in dust, and the offering table in front of it had also collapsed. Since he himself didn't have much research on Buddhism, Liang Yue didn't know which Buddha he was facing at this time. He was sitting cross-legged on a tattered futon, wearing a thin but relatively clean cyan black Taoist robe, with a light package on his lap. Out of curiosity, Liang Yue opened it and saw that wrapped in this gray package cloth, besides a change of underwear, there were only 3 jagged pieces of silver and 2 books with yellowed covers. Baopuzi Inner Chapters? Divine Immortal Tao. After roughly reading a few pages, Liang Yue immediately rolled his eyes and threw the book into the storage space. He casually threw away the underwear and cloth bag, while he put the silver pieces into his pocket. Then, the guy's originally straight waist suddenly bent, and he rested his chin in one hand, and began to try to recall the plot of this world. The new legend of Shaolin. This world doesn't seem to be any kind of official history, right? Let me think. How did the movie start? During the Kangxi period of the Qin dynasty, Shaolin disciples and Chen Jinan of the Heaven and Earth Society joined hands to organize secret societies throughout the country, striving to overthrow the Qing and restore the Ming among them. The one most feared by the Qin court hounds was Hong Ziguan. That's roughly the background. Next, Hong Ziguan, played by Jet Li, was betrayed by a Shaolin traitor, and his entire family was slaughtered, leaving only a newborn son named Hong Wending. Then, Jet Li took him to wander around, living a life of fleeing, while also acting chivalrously, raising a son with a handful of poop and a handful of urine. However, the lives of the father and son have always been very poor. In the plot, it seems that they can't even afford a bun. Later, he went to Maja village, seemingly to meet 5 children who had escaped from Shaolin. Behind the children seemed to be tattooed with 5 treasure maps. Those 5 children seemed to be called Hudidi, Ma Cheoxing, K Dezhong, Li Shike, Fang Daheng. The treasure map tattooed on their back seems to be from the Ming dynasty, and it is said to be left by the eunuch Wei's Honks, and it really is amazing. Chapter 73. Loyal and Courageous Shaolin Temple. As a pseudo-academic, Liang Yue, who could basically memorize everything he saw, considered himself to have some talent in the field of history. Due to his interest, he would occasionally pay attention to and read some unorthodox books such as Unofficial History's Shaolin Temple, as a folk temple with legendary colors in Chinese history, was naturally within his scope of attention. Over time, Liang Yue could roughly explain the details whenever this name was mentioned in certain records just by looking at the name. It is known that in this world of new Shaolin 5 ancestors, Shaolin Temple undoubtedly occupies an extremely important position. According to his memory, the main characters in this plot are almost all from this ancient temple with 1,000 years of history. According to the script arrangement of new Shaolin 5 ancestors, the cause of everything seems to be the emergence of a treasure map from the late Ming dynasty. The abbot of Shaolin Temple obtained this treasure map by chance. In order to cooperate with the Heaven and Earth Society's chief Chen Jinnan's great cause of overthrowing the Qin dynasty and restoring the Ming dynasty, the master decided to secretly give the treasure map to Chief Chen. Unexpectedly, a traitor appeared in Shaolin Temple and revealed the treasure map to the imperial court in advance in order to exchange it for his own wealth and glory, so the imperial court sent imperial guards to lead troops to encircle and suppress the temple. The abbot was afraid that the treasure map would fall into the hands of the imperial court, so he divided the map into 5 parts and tattooed them on the backs of the 5 children, and sent people to send them out through secret passages. Shaolin Temple was also charged with a crime of rebellion. The resident personnel were almost completely annihilated by the imperial troops, and the entire temple was subsequently burned to ashes, not to mention what the heroes of the world who heard the news would think. Anyway, Liang Yue was quite shocked because he, who had deliberately paid attention to the development history of Shaolin, naturally knew that although Shaolin Temple had suffered a lot of hardships in its development process, at least in this Qin dynasty, it had always been treated with courtesy by the imperial court and lived quite comfortably according to official historical records. During the Kangxi period of the Qin dynasty, Emperor Kangxi personally wrote 2 plaques and bestowed them on Shaolin to show his respect for this ancestral temple of Zen Buddhism. During the Yongzheng period, Emperor Yongzheng personally reviewed the temple's planning map and took the initiative to bear the cost of more than 9,000 taels of silver for repairing and rebuilding the temple, not to mention the Qianlong Emperor's period. This legendary perfect old man even personally visited Shaolin Temple and stayed overnight in the abbot's room. Writing many poems and plaques for this temple, the favor of 3 generations of emperors brought to this ancient temple with 1,000 years of history was not just a fame spread throughout the world. Such a temple favored by the emperor would actually think about overthrowing the Qin dynasty and restoring the Ming dynasty in this world, and was burned down by the people of the imperial court at this time. Liang Yue's heart was filled with anxiety. Identity information has been loaded, and system tasks have been issued. Please check them in time immediately. The familiar big turntable appeared in front of him, and various dazzling items had been evenly placed in each point or area. Understanding that with his current ability, he couldn't figure out this thing at all, Liang Yue naturally wouldn't spend any more thoughts on it at this time, so after taking a glance at the turntable, he simply ordered start. Stop, Ling. Congratulations to the host for drawing a reverse joint fighting technique. It is said that this fighting technique originated from military fighting skills and is combined with traditional ancient martial arts skills. It belongs to close combat techniques targeting human-to-human confrontation, and the lethality is relatively practical. Reverse joint technique? I've heard of the name of this school for a long time. It is said to be a bit similar to grappling and jiu-jitsu. This happens to make up for my weakness in unarmed close combat. Not bad. I have to practice it well during the training period. Looking at the secret book that was quietly lying in the storage space at this time, Liang Yue didn't hesitate. With a flick of his sleeve, the thin booklet suddenly appeared in his hand. Opened the cover with a whoosh. The secret book recording the reverse joint technique suddenly turned into a white stream of light and directly penetrated into his mind. For a time, various introductions to reverse joint fighting, fighting styles, combat examples, control techniques for the angle and strength of the attack, and even detailed anatomical diagrams of human bones, muscles, etc., appeared in Liang Yue's mind and turned again and again. It challenged this guy's brain's ability to bear and the speed of learning new information and affairs. Even with Liang Yue's current physical fitness and his energy attribute that far exceeded his average value, he felt a little overwhelmed at this moment. Unconsciously, this guy's forehead began to lose traces of sweat, and his old face was even flushed red, with a look of rapid breathing. A full quarter of an hour later, this abnormal phenomenon began to slowly dissipate from his body. I didn't expect the knowledge of this joint technique to be quite thick. After receiving the information in his mind, Liang Yue let out a heavy breath at this time. While secretly saying that he had benefited a lot, his face suddenly became happy. Of course, this knowledge is only knowledge after all. Knowing these various reverse joint techniques and coping methods does not mean that Liang Yue can immediately turn it into his own use and achieve thorough understanding. This requires a long-term learning and adaptation process. Above this, if you want to achieve the level of adapting to the time and place, being arbitrary and handy, you need a lot of practical experience accumulation. Liang Yue, who has lived 2 lives, naturally understands the truth thinking of those masters in this world who have spent most of their lives immersed in martial arts training. This guy suddenly felt that he still had a long way to go. Step, 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 bang. Just as Liang Yue was thinking intently at this time, a burst of messy footsteps suddenly came from outside the temple. Immediately afterwards, the 2 wooden doors that could barely cover the small temple were kicked open, and then, with a moaning and groaning of wood and decay, they crashed down in the Buddhist hall along with a cloud of dust that suddenly rose. 3 figures walked in swaggeringly at this time. looking at Liang Yue, who was facing away from them, with fiery eyes. Yo, not bad, Xiaoluzi is quite reliable this time. A Taoist priest actually came to this broken temple. Outlander, hurry up and get up for us brothers, stop talking nonsense. Be proactive and hand over all the valuables on your body, lest we three brothers have to re-educate you with a taste of physical pain later. Chapter 74, Anti-Joint Fighting Technique. What a coincidence. I was just looking for someone to test my moves on, and someone runs over to rob me. Hearing this, Liang Yue turned sideways to look behind him. He saw that the people barging into the Buddhist hall were just three ordinary men, wearing thick cotton-padded clothes and hats. With their hands tucked into their sleeves, they stood together in a slovenly, slouching manner, looking at him with a fierce expression on their faces. These should just be local thugs, seeing that I'm new here and trying to extort some money to spend? But since they were able to find this place, it means this temple shouldn't be far from town, right? That's right. According to the plot, the system couldn't have sent me to when Huang Ziguan's family was just raided. After all, it's still several years before the plot officially starts, so, am I near the Ma family village now? Looking at the three bare-handed men with unkind faces, Liang Yue only glanced at them before determining their identities, and then the guy started daydreaming again. Damn it. I'm talking to you, didn't you hear me, big brother? This kid doesn't seem to take us seriously at all. What's up, brothers? Shall we give him a lesson? Amidst a flurry of exasperated noise, the leader of the three thugs, a fat man with a face full of, was enraged by the other party's absent-minded appearance. He rushed forward in a few big steps, raising a flying kick towards Liang Yue's handsome face. Unfortunately, the fat man's attack was too obvious and lacked any skill. This flying kick was easily caught in his palm. Then, he gently twisted his wrist, while his thumb quietly pressed against the other party's ankle with a muffled sound. The thug spun half a circle in the air, then fell to the ground in a dog-eat-mud posture, his ankle still held in his hand after getting up lightly. Liang Yue originally subconsciously raised a foot to kick the fat man's kneecap. If this kick landed firmly, the other party's calf would at least suffer a bone fracture and dislocation. However, when it came to making a move, Liang Yue finally restrained the impulse to strike hard, and the raised foot temporarily changed direction, stepping on the fat man's other ankle. A miserable howl echoed in the Buddhist hall, and the thug leader immediately started thrashing on the ground like a slaughtered domestic pig. But despite the fat man's earth-shattering screams, the injury was, at most, equivalent to a normal person accidentally spraining their ankle while walking. It hurt a bit, but it wasn't serious. At most, in 10 days or half a month, he would be back to normal. Damn it. This little Taoist priest is actually a martial arts expert. He's a tough customer. Don't be polite with him. Seeing that their boss had been knocked down and was howling on the ground almost instantly, the two thugs who had been so aggressive were a little daunted. Although they shouted loudly, they subconsciously began to retreat when facing Liang Yue, who was walking over with a calm expression, and their throats involuntarily swallowed saliva for a time. The two men's moods took a sharp turn for the worse, and sweat broke out on their foreheads. Finally, a skinny thug couldn't stand it any longer, glaring with a pair of bull's eyes, and punched towards Liang Yue's head. I'll fight you. Unfortunately, a street thug who hasn't received proper training is ultimately just relying on recklessness. And the strength in his hands is somewhat lacking. The remaining third person, although a little shorter, seemed to be very quick-witted. Seeing that he couldn't win head-on, he was about to resort to dirty tricks. Taking advantage of the skinny thug's rush, this guy grabbed a handful of dirt from the ground and threw it at Liang Yue's face. For a time, dust flew and gravel splashed. Unfortunately, Liang Yue had already been prepared for this. With a light spin and flexible footwork, he drew a semicircle on the ground, letting the handful of dirt pass by. Looking at the shorty again, he now had a gleaming dagger in his hand, squinting his eyes and looking at him. This one's a ruthless one. Seeing that the eye-sealing sand had been dodged, the thug was immediately flustered. Liang Yue didn't stop at this time, continuing to walk towards the other party unhurriedly. Hey, seeing this, the thug's heart hardened, and he waved the dagger in his hand a couple of times, then stabbed it fiercely towards his chest. However, ruthless as he was, he had no method at all. The stabbing dagger was dodged with a slight sideways movement by Liang Yue, and his wrist fell into his fingers at the same time. This time, he didn't bother to be polite with the other party. With a gentle pull, a shake, and at the same time, the other hand pressed against the thug's elbow in the opposite direction. With two consecutive crisp sounds, the thug's elbow and shoulder were immediately broken into firewood by Liang Yue. The tightly held dagger also fell to the ground with a clang. A miserable wail resounded through the Buddhist hall again, but compared to the previous fat man, The shorty was really miserable at this time. It is said that it takes 100 days to heal from a bone injury, but Liang Yue felt that, even with timely treatment, it would take at least half a year for the injury he had inflicted to recover. Then, he stood calmly in the messy Buddhist hall, looking at the three people wailing and rolling at his feet after experiencing the rolling tide of zombies in the apocalypse world. The little scene in front of him couldn't affect him in the slightest. Finally, after about 5 or 6 minutes, the three people on the ground not only hoarsened their voices, but also slowly calmed down their minds. The fat man, who had been prostrating himself from the beginning, finally raised his head, with a bruised forehead and a face full of mud, looking pitifully at Liang Yue, who seemed unwilling to let them go. Then he stammered and begged for mercy. This time, it's all three of us who had eyes but couldn't see Mount Tai, disturbing the Taoist priest's quiet cultivation. We admit defeat, and we beg the Taoist priest to spare our lives. In fact, according to the thug leader's experience, they had encountered martial arts experts who had made a name for themselves when they were wreaking havoc in the town, but most of those people had faced with their collision. In most cases, they would only teach them a few lessons with their fists and feet, and then let them go. Now it's good. I didn't expect that the little Taoist priest in front of me, who looks harmless to humans and animals, would be so heavy-handed. Look, my little brother's arms are broken into 3 sections. It's easy to spare you, but in exchange, you have to answer a few questions for me. Liang Yue was waiting for his words at this time, so naturally he wouldn't be polite with them. Please ask, Taoist priest. Just ask whatever you want. Chapter 75 Ancient Gold and Silver Shop. Just as I guessed, this is Meiji Azhuang, and it's not far from the Shaolin Temple on Mount Song. At this moment, Liang Yue was walking on a town street with distinct Qing dynasty characteristics. The town in front of him was not large, but as a stopover for merchants near Zhengzhou, it was quite bustling. Tea houses, restaurants, tailor shops, gold and silver jewelry stores, pawn shops, snacks, fruit stalls, and so on. It could be said that though this Paro is small, it has all its vital organs. As his eyes wandered, he even found a money house on one side of the street. As a modern person, Liang Yue was naturally quite curious about this original ancient imperial street scene, and his eyes kept looking around. Unfortunately, he was currently short of money and couldn't afford to spend. Although the McWorld was rich in resources, it didn't produce silver. Fortunately, as a second best option, Liang Yue had a lot of gold on him, not to mention the gold mines originally from the base world. Even just the gold bars scavenged from the banks and jewelry stores in Takoshi during the apocalypse world were enough for him to live comfortably. He casually walked into a gold and silver jewelry store that looked quite large. A clerk with squinting eyes greeted him with a smile, quickly and silently sized him up, and then said, "Greetings, Taoist priest, what can I do for you at our humble shop?" Looking at the man's face, which, although smiling, faintly kept people at arm's length, Liang Yue guessed that the other party might have mistaken him for a beggar. So, without further ado, he flipped his sleeve and took out 2 gold bars weighing about 1 kilogram each from his wide sleeve. According to the exchange rate of the Qing dynasty, 1 jin is approximately equal to 16 taels, so 4 jin is more than 64 taels, and in this era, the exchange rate between gold and silver is probably about 1 to 10 converted. That's about 640 taels of silver for Liang Yue, a single man determined to roam the world and gain experience in this world. This was already a considerable fortune because according to some historical records, during the Kangxi period, 1 tael of silver was enough to buy 150 jin of the best quality rice. Moreover, the problem is that Liang Yue also has the entire base world as his backing, and he doesn't lack anything to eat or drink. He casually threw the 2 gold bars into the arms of the clerk, whose face was already shining with excitement. Then Liang Yue sat down on a chair next to him and waved to the clerk. As the saying goes, money makes the mare go. This is an unchanging truth that applies to ancient and modern times. In a short while, 7 or 8 exquisite snacks were placed on the small table next to Liang Yue, and a pot of tea, infused with unknown leaves, was constantly emitting faint tea fragrance. Even the incense burner in the corner of the shop had just been lit with sandalwood. It really allowed Liang Yue to experience firsthand the feeling that the customer is God. After a while, the clerk with squinting eyes came out from the back hall, and then came forward with an apologetic look, looking at him and said, "I'm really sorry, Taoist priest. My master happened to have something to do just now and went out to visit a friend, and cannot personally come to receive you for the time being. It's okay. Just give me back the silver quickly." Liang Yue didn't think much when he heard this, and replied, holding a cup of tea and looking at the clerk, "You are very generous, Taoist priest. Please wait a moment." This time, the clerk was gone for a while, a full half an hour, leaving him alone in the front hall, which was really intriguing. It wasn't until the door of the gold and silver shop was closed from the outside that Liang Yue, who lacked serious Jianghu experience, finally realized what was happening. Okay. I've only been in this world for less than half a day, and I've already encountered two groups of people coming to make trouble. The three little punks before just wanted to rob some money. Now, the situation in this store, they probably want to keep something more. The local customs are really simple and honest. Just as Liang Yue was sitting there sighing inwardly, the squinting-eyed clerk finally appeared again, still with that emotionless smile on his face. However, this time, he was followed by four strong men, each holding a wooden stick, staring at him with wide eyes, seemingly trying to create some kind of intimidating power. Unfortunately, Liang Yue didn't even bother to glance at them at this time, holding a cup of tea in his hand, with a half-smiling expression on his face. Waiting to see how the other party would fool him. I have really neglected the Taoist priest, but this time I'm afraid I'll have to make you come in vain. A batch of gold bars was lost from our shop a few days ago, exactly the same as the two you gave us today, so, for the sake of prudence, this shop cannot exchange the silver for you for the time being. Also, if it is convenient, please cooperate with our shop and go to the government office. It just so happens that our boss's brother-in-law is the chief constable of this county. That lord is as wise as a god in solving cases, and is famous in our county. I think he will definitely not wrong the Taoist priest. What is your opinion? As soon as the squinting-eyed man finished speaking, the four strong men behind him immediately surrounded Liang Yue, with ferocious smiles on their faces. I thought it would be some kind of reason, but your statement is not very original. Seeing this, Liang Yue's original smile immediately faded, turning into a cold look, and a cold light flashed in his eyes with a thought. A sharp straight knife instantly appeared in his hand. Without any hesitation, he raised his hand and swept the four people in front of him. Shui, an arc-shaped crescent blade light instantly flashed before his eyes. The wooden sticks in the hands of the four people on the opposite side were undoubtedly split in two, and at the same time, the sharp edge directly slashed across their chests, leaving deep, bone-deep wounds. In the blink of an eye, blood soaked the front of their clothes. One unlucky fellow even had half of his palm directly cut off by this knife. The four of them immediately screamed in unison, softly falling to the ground, wailing while clutching their wounds, without a trace of their previous ferocity. Seeing this situation, the squinting-eyed man suddenly showed a look of astonishment, looking at the straight knife that suddenly appeared in Liang Yue's hand. His eyes finally opened, filled with horror. However, immediately afterwards, a trace of cunning flashed in the depths of this man's eyes. He stepped back and shouted loudly at the same time, "Come on! There are bandits robbing and killing." Before the clerk of the gold shop could finish a sentence, Liang Yue had already followed closely, and the straight knife in his hand was used again. Immediately, the squinting-eyed man's mouth was cut horizontally with a neat gash, and half of his tongue flew out. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.